So I'm not going to sit here and wait for an illegal alien to come in this country and rape someone. I'm not going to sit
Jesus
here and wait for an
Christ,
illegal
dude.
alien to come in this country.
Yeah, but you
and
wait
murder
around-
someone. I'm not going to sit in this country and wait for an illegal alien to commit Grand Theft Auto when we can take preventative measures to ensure that that never happens in this country.
Someone who's going to be raped in this country, a woman who's going to be raped in this country, is overwhelmingly more likely to be raped by a native-born citizen and someone they know than a random attacker like what happened in Laken Riley's case. It doesn't mean that it's not a tragedy, okay? But Republicans need to stop. I mean, they're not going to stop because it justifies their racism. We wouldn't fucking hear about it if it was like a Scandinavian immigrant or something like that, or even like, you know, a natural-born citizen. They are absolutely fucking silent about the overwhelming number of white men, Republican lawmakers that have been implicated. Spare me the audacity, okay, to claim that you guys give a shit about violence against women. I'm not even going to take you fucking seriously at this point, okay? It's just disgusting. You're peddling this trope that undocumented immigrants are violent criminals, okay? And they factually are not. Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a safe and healthy holiday season. I know we're gearing up towards that time of year, so hope you're getting to spend a lot of time with your loved ones and people you care about. And yeah, just staying warm if you're anywhere near the Midwest. We've been getting some very cold temperatures, so be sure to bundle up and all that. But yeah, thanks so much for tuning in for this video. I won't filibuster too long. Just kind of want to get right into this video because I think it's an interesting format for sure. Jubilee is pulling out all the stops, trying new things to see what hits because you know, some of their content surrounded. It's a cool concept, but it seems to be waning a little bit in terms of popularity, in terms of views. So who knows? Maybe this kind of fight to the death, two people debating claims might be more interesting. I will say I do like the smaller roundtable type episodes. Wink, wink. Might be seeing something coming up soon for me in that regard. But I do think that a format like this might hopefully lead to at least more productive dialogue. Now, it might just be equally infuriating with two people talking past each other. I have a sneaking suspicion it will be the latter. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into this episode. In terms of news and things like that, I kind of hinted at something. I'll be traveling out to LA pretty soon to film an upcoming video with Jubilee. I'm not going to disclose anything more, of course, but definitely stay tuned for that. I'm excited for that opportunity, and I'm excited to be a part of that. I react to a decent amount of these videos, and it'll be exciting to once again be in front of the camera discussing and hopefully having a productive conversation as much as is possible for that format. So I'm looking forward to that. In terms of other stuff like that, if you're unaware, the Unfuck America tour, which I'm a part of, is actually going to be at AmFest, which is Turning Point USA's like annual conference that they have. It's obviously huge and even bigger now following the death of Charlie Kirk. You know, they're really pulling out all the stops. So the Unfuck America tour is designed to be the counter to that in terms of providing the left-wing solution, or rather, you know, left-wing counter to Turning Point's grip on young people and, you know, how prevalent they are across college campuses and talking to young people. So that's what this organization is trying to do. I'm loving to be a part of it. It's still up in the air as to whether or not I will be able to make it for it. I do want to be able to make it. It's going to be the 20th and 21st of December this month. You can check it out. Link in my bio to donate if you're interested in helping me hopefully attend, as well as just donate to the work that the National Ground Game PAC are doing to hopefully take back the youth. I think that's something that's very important, something that I'm fighting for, and if that's important to you, I'd hope that you would help us in that endeavor. So definitely check that out. If you're there, definitely show up in Tucson. In terms of all the details will be out. You can check on their website. All that information, link in my bio, things of that nature. But that's kind of the main details or kind of housekeeping that I have right now. As always, if you're interested in more of my content, be sure to subscribe. And I don't have much else more. You know, I have not, like I said, this is a blind reaction. Obviously, I've seen like a little teaser trailer from them, but I've not watched this all the way through. So I'm curious to see how it goes. I will say that this CJ guy is pretty insufferable, pretty allergic to addressing the points that are made. I've already made my thoughts known on Parker. I'm not a fan of infighting, so I will keep my criticisms of him to a minimum, just because, you know, we got bigger fish to fry than someone who I might find a little bit annoying. But regardless, that's beside the point. I'm excited to get into this episode and see what it's all about. So I'll put all that to the side, and without further ado, let's get right into it.
They believe that he should be the president because they believe that his agenda of mass deportations were going to help make America safe again.
So I asked name one piece of evidence in the case that you dispute, and you couldn't do so.
I just answered the question. You just don't like how I answered the question. I'm sorry about that.
So you didn't answer the question. You didn't provide a specific example. It sounds like the American people didn't do research on the case, yet they still were willing to vote for Donald Trump.
Welcome to Faceoff,
All
where
right,
two
here we
people
go.
debate 4 claims. 1 clock, no interruptions.
No interruptions. Let's see how
Today,
that goes.
Parker, a liberal political commentator, activist, and digital creator, faces off against CJ Pearson, a conservative activist, political advisor, and host of the podcast Family Matters. The clock starts now.
My first face-off claim is mass deportations are harmful.
All right.
So I completely
Don't bring up
disagree.
Laken
I
Riley
think that
challenge.
what is harmful is the death of people like Laken Riley.
Oh my God.
Someone whose life was robbed from her by an illegal alien who had no business being in this country, who stalked her like an animal, who mauled her like a dog,
Oh wow.
and
Already
beat
on the
her and pummeled
dehumanizing
her, and now she is dead.
rhetoric.
As someone who is from Georgia, stories like that should not exist in this country.
Sure.
Stories like that should not be something that we have to contend with.
It's disgusting. Like the rhetoric is disgusting. Obviously what happened to her is an absolute tragedy, but the way that conservatives just unapologetically use dehumanizing rhetoric to refer to human beings in an effort to view them as less than human and transfer that type of dehumanization to all immigrants is truly vile and disgusting. Okay, they claim to care about crime, yet don't care about the fact that we have a criminal in the Oval Office, a sexual assaulter, a sexual abuser, a serial rapist in the Oval Office, yet somehow they claim to care that immigrants are the real problem, that undocumented immigrants, despite the fact that, I hope Parker brings this up, they are vastly less likely to commit crimes, okay? The number one threat to people in general, and in terms of, young people in general, are white guys. It's true. It's factually true. So, like, I'm not going to play this game. I don't mean to interrupt immediately, but I'm not about to, give any credence to this idea that, undocumented immigrants are whatsoever an absolute, overarching threat. They fundamentally are not. Of course, you're going to cherry pick examples, and of course, those examples are awful, but they do not represent, immigrants as a whole. And to say otherwise is just deeply, racist, xenophobic, and just factually inaccurate. These people are going to pander, and parade around like Laken Riley as if they give a shit about her. But the reality is that if Laken Riley required life-saving reproductive care, they would not support that. Okay, they would support policies that would make it more likely that women like her would be unable to receive that care. Okay, that make it harder for women to report instances that happen to them. So they only care about sexual violence and violence against women when they can use it in their tirade against immigrants. Factually the case. So I don't give any credence to this claim that he somehow cares about it. He cares about it because he's able to use it to score political points and demonize immigrants. Nothing further.
And her family should not have to deal with the despair and pain that they did. And so when you ask me to feel bad about illegal aliens who are being mass deported from our country, I don't feel bad because they broke the law.
Wow.
And I know that if I broke the law as an American citizen, I would be put in jail. I'd be separated from my family. If you broke the law,
yeah,
you would
masked
be put in
men would come up to your fucking door and break it down and completely deport you without due process. Yeah, that's definitely how it works, right, CJ?
you would be separated from your family. And I don't believe there should be 2 tiers of justice in this country
there's
for
one tier
illegal
of
aliens
justice
and American
for all of
citizens.
us.
And so I think that the American people overwhelmingly voted for this. And so exactly why President Trump won the Electoral College and he won the popular vote. Because he ran on this. This is not some surprise. It's not some random thing he just...
Yes, he did. It's entirely random. It's not random, but he did not directly run on this. He did run on mass deportations. That's true. But the way that he framed it, and of course this is intellectually just disingenuous, and everyone who voted for this likes to say that I didn't vote for the masked ICE agents to come around to homes and just completely rip people apart, law-abiding citizens who may happen to be undocumented in the process of getting their visa or permanent stay. They are literally ripping people out of courthouses. People are doing it the right way. They are deporting them. They are rounding them up without due process and deporting them. That's it, in violation of judges' orders. Completely putting a middle finger to our justice system. You say there shouldn't be a 2-tier justice system, yet you don't support the 1-tier justice system that involves due process for all, regardless of legal status. In fact, due process is what determines whether you are a legal resident or are a citizen. If someone snatches you off the street right now and claims that you are not a citizen, how are you going to prove that you are? Oh, wait, a justice system, due process, having your day in court. No, apparently not. Apparently they don't think it applies to them. Yeah, the American people did in terms of voting for Donald Trump. Majority of people voting for it. And the majority of people do support deportations. They support deportations for violent criminals. They support deportations for people who are trafficking drugs into this country. Of course they support that. And most people do, myself included. I don't think those people should be in our country, and we should take every means possible to ensure that those people who are dangerous are not in our country. However, that does not involve deporting people who have been in this country for years for decades and either happen to be on an overstayed visa or happen to be children of immigrants who were brought here as children when they were undocumented by their parents, dreamers under the DACA program. No, they don't support that. So once again, I say this all the time. He's very effectively implementing the Mott and Bailey fallacy. It's one of my favorites to point out. The idea that the Americans will overwhelmingly support mass deportations. True, in the loose sense of they support deporting people who are not here legally and are violent criminals. But he's using that to defend a more, a more shaky claim, which is that Americans support the way that ICE is terrorizing communities and ripping people apart and not giving them their day in court, and overall just being a gang of thugs that are just absolutely not following the law by any standard whatsoever at all. Aren't even required to identify themselves. There's no way to prove that ICE agents are ICE agents. Anyone could just put on a police vest and a mask and go terrorizing communities, and suddenly they're as legitimate as an ICE agent, considering they don't have to identify themselves, or they often don't, and they cover and mask their identity. So I'm not going to give a slice of credence to CJ's claim that, like, he cares about any of this, because he's just blatantly lying.
To do, this is what he ran on. It's promises made, promises kept, and I think the American people support him in that.
Yeah, so I think what happened to Laken Riley is absolutely horrible, genuinely. I think that Democrats from our position, we do agree with deporting people, especially my position. People who have committed violent crimes or what we deem as bad crimes enough to deport someone. But I would say for the vast majority of people who are detained by ICE, over 70% of people, they have no prior criminal offenses. And undocumented immigrants, based on multiple different studies, specifically you can point to one from pnas.org, and I can give you plenty of others. Actually, I have a bibliography in my bio I'd love to show you as well, that literally indicates that undocumented immigrants are multiple times less likely to commit violent crime, drug crime, property crime in the country comparative to natural born U.S. citizens. True. So this idea that they're coming to the country and they're committing these atrocious crimes to an extent that natural born U.S. citizens are is kind of ridiculous to me. They are less likely to commit crimes. Secondly, I just want to address the reality of the matter, that we can still provide a pathway to citizenship for those that are already in the country and documented who have not committed a violent crime or bad crime, and it would actually make it easier for law enforcement to focus on people who are actually a threat to our safety and security as a community, because instead of them spending 70% of their time focusing on people who are not a threat to our safety and security, they would be focusing on the people who have committed violent crimes and bad crimes. So I think we both don't want those violent offenses to happen. I think we both agree that it's horrible and atrocious, and I think we both agree that people in those situations should be held accountable and they should be deported on the condition that they're being put in a prison in another country, because we don't want them running free doing it in another country either. So given those points, I guess what would your argument be for deporting people who have not committed violent crimes or bad crimes? And also, like, I do want to add on top, like, Donald Trump's a convicted criminal and he didn't go to prison because you guys voted for him. So it's not like you want to hold every criminal accountable.
I think that we shouldn't wait for criminals to commit violent acts before we get rid of them, because they already committed a crime when they entered this country illegally without any regard for our laws and any respect.
Can we focus on that for a second? I don't think we should wait for criminals to commit crimes before we deal with them. So we're going to deport people or, like, wait for them on the basis of that they're going to commit a crime in the future? Wow. Department of Pre-Crime. Minority Report. Back at it again. What? Yeah, of course. We should lock people up, because if they ever do anything wrong, they might commit another crime. This is just a stupid argument. Because people enter the country illegally, which, by the way, is not a criminal offense. It is a civil offense. It is a misdemeanor, the same level as jaywalking. It doesn't mean that they're the same crime, or it doesn't mean that they're the same offense, but in terms of level, they factually are. If you re-enter after deportation, then it becomes a felony. If you commit a crime, of course, you're subject to deportation. But to say that, like, people who enter this country illegally have committed, like, a crime in the sense of, oh my God, they're a criminal, is to misunderstand criminal law. So no, absolutely not. We should deport them before they become a criminal. Is crazy. Yeah, of course, we should lock people up before. We should, punish them before. No one's saying, but it's a good thing that we have illegal immigration. That's a ludicrous claim. Okay, we shouldn't have illegal immigration. We should make it easier for people to get here legally. And in terms of the people who are already here, the over 11 million people who are here illegally, it is not practical. It is not humane. It is not financially responsible or feasible to deport all of them. Okay, it's not like snapping our fingers. Even if we did that, a bunch of industries, including the agricultural industry, would fail overnight. Okay, we need to have a practical solution. And the most humane and the most beneficial solution is a pathway to citizenship for the overwhelming majority of individuals who are here and are contributing positively to our society. Okay? That's the truth. Okay? So we're not gonna wait until a vast minority of them, overwhelming minority of them, commit a crime. That's ridiculous. We don't judge people based on, like, the thought that they might commit a crime in the future. If we did that, every single man would be locked up at the moment he was born, because men commit 90% of the violent crimes. So every man out there is a potential criminal. Stupid, idiotic logic.
for those laws at all. And so I'm not going to sit here and wait for an illegal alien to come in this country and rape someone. I'm not going to sit here and wait for an illegal alien to come in this country.
Yeah, but you
and
wait
murder
around.
someone. I'm not going to sit in this country and wait for an illegal alien to commit grand theft auto when we could take preventative measures to ensure that that never happens in this country. What happened in Lincoln Riley didn't have to happen, but of course, with the soft on immigration laws and enforcement that we saw under the Biden administration, it did indeed happen. And so, while I believe that we both
and there's been tons of cases that have happened like that during the Trump administration, first and second, that don't get as much publicity because Republicans can't use it to decry immigration. Oh my God, someone got in. People are going to get in. People are going to slip through the cracks. The solution to that isn't to shut down all immigration. Of course, we should do everything possible to prevent violent acts from happening. But this farcical idea that we're going to prevent it just by having a ban on immigration, with that not having much like worse consequences, is insane. Okay? Yes, we should work to stop illegal immigration. There are different ways to do that. Okay? And one of them involves having a pathway to citizenship. It doesn't involve completely shutting down our economic powerhouse in this country, which is immigrant labor. Okay? In many cases, undocumented labor. Those people are very much exploited, okay? And we should do everything we can to give them a pathway to citizenship. This idea that doing those things inherently means that, like, women are going to be raped is entirely false. Someone who's going to be raped in this country, a woman who's going to be raped in this country, is overwhelmingly more likely to be raped by a native-born citizen and someone they know than a random attacker like what happened in Lincoln Riley's case. It doesn't mean that it's not a tragedy, okay? But Republicans need to stop. I mean, they're not going to stop because it justifies their racism. We wouldn't fucking hear about it if it was like a Scandinavian immigrant or something like that, or even like, you know, a natural-born citizen. They are absolutely fucking silent about the overwhelming number of white men, Republican lawmakers that have been implicated. Roy Moore won the nomination in Alabama despite literally being a pedophile. Okay, like, so spare me the audacity, okay, to claim that you guys give a shit about violence against women. I'm not even going to take you fucking seriously at this point. Okay, it's just disgusting. You're peddling this trope that illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants are violent criminals. Okay, and they factually are not. Factually, there's no basis in it, and cherry picking examples is just disgusting.
That what happened to Laken Riley was tragic beyond words and beyond measure.
No shit.
I think that we take a different lesson from that. You say that, you know, you and many Democrats support deporting violent illegal aliens. Well, what if they turn violent when they're here? Why don't we just get rid of them before they have the opportunity to turn violent? That would make sense. And so when it comes to...
Why don't we lock people up before they commit crimes? What the fuck is this motherfucker talking about? Yeah, of course. Yeah. All right. Sure, yeah, we should lock people up before they commit crimes, so they don't have the opportunity to. This is the insane part. Innocent until proven guilty, until the person's not white or they're an immigrant, and suddenly they're immediately a threat because we can't allow them to possibly be in this country. The only way this works if he thinks we should lock up every single man because of their propensity to violence, statistically. But he doesn't. He's going to cherry pick his statistics. Okay? If we were to lock people up in this country based on their propensity and likelihood to commit violence, especially violence against women, we would be locking up white, straight men way before undocumented immigrants. Overwhelmingly more. Okay, so this never holds. This idea never holds, okay? It's like, oh my God, why do you threatened by me as a man? Okay, it's unfair to blame me for the actions of that shitty guy. But as soon as apparently it's immigrants, you can blame them for the actions of a select few, overwhelmingly that they do not represent. What the fuck are we talking about? I'm not even going to pay attention. I'm not even going to... Jesus Christ.
Criminals and all of those things. You know, President Trump was the victim of obviously lawfare, perpetuated by the Biden DOJ. So I think it's a little bit of a different situation than an illegal alien who, again, as I said, stalked, mauled, and impaled a young woman from my home state of Georgia. So I don't really know what the correlation there is. But what I will say, though, is that I think that we should be proactive, not reactive to this problem, because we don't need another Laken Riley in this country.
Well, then that same argument.
There are Laken Rileys every day. Every single day. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of women who are sexually assaulted every single day in this country. You don't give a shit. There are Laken Rileys, okay? They don't get the media attention because Republicans can't use it as a campaign to go after immigrants. That's why you give a shit about it. If you cared about violence against women, you would not be focusing on immigrants first, or even undocumented immigrants. Okay? This is the same guy who would probably deny that we have a rape culture in this society. That we have a problem of not believing women, not believing victims when they come forward. This is probably the same guy who would, have a tirade against the Me Too movement. But suddenly now that he can use it to justify his hatred towards immigrants, oh my God, he's the savior of women. I don't take him seriously. I don't give a shit. Okay, I'm not gonna allow him to try to save face by saying he somehow cares about Laken Riley.
Active to this problem, because we don't need another Laken Riley in this country.
God, Jesus Christ.
Well, then that same argument would mean that we should ban tourism, we should ban legal immigration, because tourists and legal immigrants are more likely to commit these types of crimes than undocumented immigrants. So if we're specifically trying to prevent these types of crimes, because the nominal level of crime will increase, not only should we stop having children, we should stop legal immigration, and we should stop tourism under your perspective. And then also, it's not irrelevant to bring up Trump. You guys literally did not hold him accountable for the crime that he committed, specifically when you voted for him, because in the determination, in the sentencing, they brought up the fact that Donald Trump being elected president is essentially a reason why he wouldn't end up going to prison. And it's not quote unquote lawfare. He was determined in a criminal court based on an entire decision from a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed 34 felonies. It's not just a Democrat hoax that they investigated like quote unquote Russia, where it was an investigation. They didn't determine collusion between Trump and Russia. That's an investigation. In that circumstance, they didn't determine collusion. They did determine interference on behalf of Russia, but not on behalf of like Trump colluding with them. So again, we have to look at it in terms of there was a jury determination. He was held accountable for doing it. He did actually commit those crimes. You can say you don't think it should be a crime, or you think it shouldn't have been as much in terms of how it's viewed, or you think it's not that big of a deal. But the same thing I would say for undocumented immigrants who have not committed a violent crime or bad crime. They kind of like, could say the same way as like they jaywalked, right? They walked across the street where it wasn't, a threat to anyone's safety or security. Right, and violating the law in that manner is essentially the same as someone coming to our country undocumented who violated the law in that way. I really don't see a meaningful distinction because we don't think every law should necessarily be enforced. Like I'm on TikTok. TikTok it's literally banned. It's not allowed in the country right now. It's just not being enforced by the Trump administration to be illegal. So there are plenty of laws in the books we don't enforce. But apparently we need to enforce the laws whenever it comes to undocumented immigrants, but not when it comes to someone like Donald Trump.
Well, first and foremost, you keep bringing up President Trump's, issue in New York City, where he was found guilty by a New York City jury in Deep Blue, New York City. I'm not really sure how that, again, is related to the conversation we're having about mass deportation and illegal aliens in this country, because last time I checked, Donald Trump is an American citizen, or he would not be president of the United States. But when it comes to, enforcing our immigration laws, it's not just about what crimes they've committed or will commit. It's about the fact that a nation without borders is not a nation at all. It actually is what fundamentally makes a country a country. And so it's not out of, a lack of empathy or a lack of concern for others that we're enforcing these laws. It's the same reason that when you go to sleep at night, you lock your door, not just because you hate the people outside the doors, because you love the people inside of it. And so that is why we're seeing, President Trump do what he's doing to ensure that we have a border that's secure. It's exactly why he's undertaking these enforcement actions. They're supported by the American people. Again, the American people gave him a mandate to undertake these actions. He ran on this. This is his platform. These aren't some things that he just pulled out of a hat and said, I'm going to do today. I'm going to let Tom Homan just run free and just decide that he's going to deport a bunch of illegal aliens today. No, he ran on that. He did that. The American people knew what they were getting. And you may not like that, but you got to take that up with democracy. And I thought you guys were the party of democracy, right? You guys support the will of the American people. And the will of the American people gave him an electoral college victory, a popular vote victory, and he's doing exactly what they desire.
So we're not advocating for an open border. Again, for people who are being deported, there are particular restrictions. If you've committed a violent crime or bad crime, I specifically think people should. And if you have any prior criminal record of doing so, then you should be deported in that context. That's not an open border. That's obviously having some levels of restriction. So I think it's disingenuous to say that that's an open border. Why did I bring up Donald Trump committing crimes? Because you brought up specifically committing crimes in terms of people should be held accountable or punished for it if they commit a crime. We're a party of law and order, right? So why aren't we a party of law and order when it comes to Donald Trump? Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. It's not only that, but he also pardoned violent rioters who beat police officers on January 6th, and he called them patriots. So the idea that Donald Trump cares about addressing violent crime in this country just doesn't seem true to me. If you want to look at the overall determinations for actually limiting crime in this country, again, border enforcement would have a better job at identifying people who have committed violent crimes and bad crimes and who are actually a threat to the safety and security of our community if they weren't focusing over 70% of their time detaining and deporting people who have not committed violent crimes or bad crimes and have no prior criminal record outside of just coming to this country undocumented. We have to acknowledge our current legal immigration process. It takes too long, too costly of a process to go through. And Donald Trump's used those exact same excuses for saying it's justified for him to deport people without due process, not following the legal way. So why is it unjustified for undocumented immigrants to come to the country through an undocumented process, an illegal process, but for some reason it's totally okay for Donald Trump to use an illegal process to deport them?
Well, to go back to a previous point, I think you're oversimplifying this very intentionally, right? The people, illegal aliens in this country, are not just committing offenses like jaywalking. They're raping people.
No.
They are trafficking drugs. illegal aliens aren't raping people. That would be news to many. So I think if you're looking at that, you're looking at the trafficking.
That's insane. Well, Parker apparently can't interrupt him, but I'll fucking interrupt him. What the fuck is he talking about? Yeah, of course, there are a percentage of people who commit violent crimes everywhere. No one is saying that 0 undocumented immigrants are committing 0 crimes. Of course, there's going to be some crimes, and there's going to be violent crimes in that. That's like just a reality of the society we live in. Okay, we don't deport every single person. We don't lock up every single person because of the propensity of some of them, even a minority of them, committing crimes. Under no other circumstance do we believe this to be the case. Okay, absolutely, we should have a border. And we should have a border that's enforced, and we should do everything possible to ensure people don't come into this country illegally. It's not good to have people in this country illegally, mainly for a lot of reasons. One, if they're in this country illegally and they aren't, the undocumented immigrants still pay a lot in taxes. They pay over $100 billion in taxes every year. But if they're actual documented individuals, they'd be taxed even more. Okay? People who aren't documented in this country overpay in taxes and they're not even eligible for benefits, okay? So, like, making them documented, okay, would literally just bring in more tax revenue. I don't like this. It's ludicrous, okay? To claim that, oh my God, there's going to be any increase in crime, therefore we should never do anything at all, or you should never allow it at all. It's stupid. We never believe this. There's always a risk assessment, and it's terrible, and it's awful. And if you want to stop violence against women, look to the most common perpetuator. Okay? It's not immigrants. It fundamentally is not. Okay? Native-born citizens, men who are committing these crimes, overwhelmingly more likely. He doesn't give a shit about that. Again, this is like such a red herring. Like, I don't even care about this. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, it's awful. It's terrible that this happens to people, but the only reason they care about it is because they can demonize immigrants. That is entirely what it's about.
Drugs, that is happening, and the president is deporting those people. And so I think that, if someone decides to jaywalk today and rape someone tomorrow, then again, it goes back to preventative actions that we're undertaking to ensure that the American people are safe.
So that wasn't what I was saying at all. I was saying that coming into our country undocumented is akin to jaywalking. I wasn't saying that undocumented immigrants are just jaywalking or they've never committed a violent offense. Again, I said in circumstances in which they have committed a violent offense, they should be deported in that context. So not only just have they committed it in this country, but if they've committed it in another country, I don't think that they should be allowed into our country, say if they've committed like some sort of atrocious crime. Like, for example, if someone was held civilly liable of sexually abusing a woman, would you let them legally enter the country?
Well, here's the deal. I think it's not jaywalking when they're coming into this country to bring fentanyl. It's not just jaywalking into our country when they're coming into this country to rape American citizens. Many of these people are coming to our country to do it real harm. They could potentially commit terrorist acts, could potentially do things that lead to a loss of life of American lives. And that's my priority here. I actually fundamentally, I'm going to be real honest with you, I don't care about illegal aliens. I don't care about
you care so much about them.
People that are trying to come to this country, invade our country, and have no respect for the laws of this land. Because if you don't respect the laws of this land to enter it, you're not going to respect it when you get here. And so I care about protecting Americans. I care about protecting their well-being, their safety, ensuring that they have opportunities.
No, you don't.
And it's funny to me that you say that it doesn't seem like Republicans or conservatives care about, ending violent crime, because President Trump has shown that he is. It's exactly why he's deployed the National Guard to cities like Chicago, that many people call Chirac, and we act like that's just a normal thing. To call a city in America Chirac,
who the fuck is calling it that shit?
And we just think that's just a funny meme. No, that has no place in this country. You look at places like Memphis, Black Americans welcoming them, saying, please, thank you, Donald Trump, for bringing the National Guard in. Democrats oppose that. But yet, we're the party that doesn't care about violent crime in your eyes. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. The math's not mathing to me on that.
Again, undocumented immigrants are less likely to commit these crimes. So although you can sit there and you can try to act like undocumented immigrants are committing all these crimes, they're more proportionally likely. No, all the data indicates they're less likely to do that. Why are we sitting here acting like they're a huge threat to our communities when proportionally speaking, they're less likely to be a threat to our community? Plus, the mechanism that I brought up would make our country more safe, where, again, law enforcement would focus on people who are a threat to the safety and security of our country rather than people who are not, who have been here for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, where they're living with their families, working in their communities, and making this country a better place. I don't think undocumented immigrants across the board are making this country a worse place. And I definitely reject that idea that you're bringing up. And then in terms of the violent crimes, again, Donald Trump pardoned violent rioters who beat police officers, and he called them patriots. That's explicitly releasing violent criminals onto the streets. We're not advocating to release violent criminals on the streets. Again, I want to deport people in those particular contexts, and I want to prevent that from happening. I think my mechanism does so to a greater extent than yours. So I guess I'm really not understanding why you're trying to portray undocumented immigrants as being this huge threat and risk to our safety and security, but then you're not willing to even address the argument I brought up. Like, Would you let someone legally enter the country if they were held civilly liable of sexually abusing a woman?
Well, going back to the point that you just made, all crime is bad. I think crime committed by Americans is bad, which is why President Trump is looking to bring that to a halt. And it's exactly why he's going after criminal illegal aliens in this country who are already criminals by nature of illegally entering this country. I think where we fundamentally disagree is that you think that, well, Americans are committing more crime than illegal aliens, so that's just less of a problem. I disagree. Number one, these people are guests, but also unwelcome guest, right? You give a little bit more grace to members of your family. That's true. If your cousin does something, he may be a little bit of a knucklehead and he may not, always be on the straight and narrow, but that's your family. And you don't get to choose your family, but you do get to choose who you let into your home. And you definitely don't have to let someone stay in your home who barges into your home, disrespects your home. Okay? And so, yes.
What if we bombed the house next to us? And completely because of, I don't know, let's say we snuck or sold guns to the people in that house that made the house unsafe. And then it drove the people out of that house and they ended up taking refuge in our house. And then we fucking kicked them out because how dare they fucking invade? That's a more apt comparison. The house analogy is fucking stupid because I don't have a fucking economy inside of my house. Okay, I don't have an entire network. Okay, of agriculture and commerce and transportation and it's a flawed analogy, of course. And of course, conservatives love to oversimplify things to a way that their tiny brains can understand. But that's not how it works whatsoever at all. Okay, undocumented migration, illegal immigration is going to happen, especially with an unstable Central America, which often happens due to lax gun laws and cutting of foreign aid and meddling in those countries that leads to more instability. So I don't like this is just stupid.
Send them back. They don't have the same grace and luxury that we extend to our fellow American brothers and sisters. But that person will still go to jail. Your cousin will still go to jail. And so I don't care if proportionally American citizens are more likely to commit certain crimes in this country. They will be held accountable. But in a lot of instances in this country, especially under the Biden administration, illegal aliens who were already, again, criminals by nature of illegal entry to this country were not held accountable. They were
actually they're criminals. Brother, you probably underage drink. You probably speed on the daily. I don't give a shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, we should not have people illegally enter this country. It's not a good thing. Is it going to happen? Of course it's going to happen to some degree. Okay, and we're talking about a practical solution of what we're going to do about 11 million people who are currently in this country, and the overwhelming majority of which are either have been here for years and years and years, or are committing positively to our economy in terms of the workforce. It's fundamentally true. What are we going to do about that? And finding and rounding all of them up and sending masked agents into our communities to terrorize people does way more harm than those people have ever or will ever cause as a whole. Are there going to be isolated incidents? Of course. Okay, and we deal with those as they come up. Okay, but this mass blanket assessment that undocumented immigrants are dangerous or violent is just false. It's just not true, and it's driven by racism. Okay, it's driven by the need to have a boogeyman. Okay, and they're using women and women's safety. Same thing with trans women and stuff like that. They're using women's safety as a crutch to be bigoted pieces of shit. Okay, they don't give a shit about women. They don't give a shit about women and their safety. Otherwise, they'd address the fact that white guys are the most likely threat to women. Okay, it's true. Native-born men are. Okay, but they don't spend time. They spend their entire lives talking about how men are so persecuted, okay, and how men are, oh my God, men are just being targeted so much, or, there's this demonization of men. Yet they're demonizing all immigrants for the actions of an overwhelming minority of them. What are we doing?
Caught and released back into the country to commit more crimes, to rape more people, to burglarize more businesses. All of those things did indeed happen. That is a problem. I think our fundamental disagreement here is that I'm willing to give more grace to Americans. I still believe in consequences. But again, you are an unwelcome, unauthorized guest into our home. You don't get to continue to be a bull in a china shop when I never invited you in the first place.
I'll ask the question again. If someone was held civilly liable of sexually abusing a woman, would you let them legally enter the country?
All right, Bart.
I would not allow someone that is not from this country to enter this country who is accused legitimately of a sexual offense.
Okay, so I'm talking about the legal process. Every single part of the legal process has been determined that they're allowed to be in the country. The only last process is for you specifically to determine whether or not they are allowed to get into the country. But you know that they have been held civilly liable of sexually abusing a woman. Would you let them legally enter our country?
I would not allow a non-citizen of this country to enter this country if they're accused of that.
That's not what I said. I said someone who's going through the legal process, they were held civilly liable of sexually abusing a woman. Given that you understand this, would you let them legally enter the country?
Parker asked and answered. I think I've answered your question, but I understand the connection that you're trying to connect here. Well, I think that you realize that the immigration issue is not a winning issue for your side of the aisle, which is why you're pivoting to an unrelated issue about President Trump and his history. That, again, was decided by a New York City jury in a deep blue constituency.
Wow,
so,
it just can't be right.
Going back to your point about whether or not mass deportations are good or bad for America, they're absolutely good. They're keeping Americans safe. I care about the people inside our home, not the people outside of it. And that is exactly why I believe that President Trump got the mandate that he did from the American people.
So again, it doesn't seem like you addressed the actual point that I made there. Like, again, I'm just addressing the fact that we wouldn't let him legally enter the country, so it doesn't make sense to let him specifically become president of the United States given that determination. It doesn't make sense that he would address crime at a greater extent. And it's also weird for you to say, like, I'm not good in this topic, or like I might not feel like I have the ability to argue this when I chose the topic to debate you on. So clearly this is just something as an aspect of the conversation about immigration because it does relate.
It sounds like your beef is not with me, but it's with democracy, because the American people decided
he's having you defend the claim you're making. Why are you pushing me on it? People elected Trump to do that. Okay, maybe they're wrong? Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm actually right, and you can't be mad at me or criticize my position because my guy won. What?
President Trump, they gave him, again, a popular vote victory, an electoral college victory, because they realized that the allegations against him were nonsense, malarkey. And you know, if you have a problem with that, you can take it up with the 80+ million Americans who voted for him.
Can you name one piece of evidence in the E. Jean Carroll case, the civil case, that you dispute?
I think at the end of the day, when you look
at it, he knows
nothing.
Again, he doesn't know anything about the case.
Looked at that case. They made the conclusion that President Trump is who they believe can make America safe again, make America great again, make America secure again. And that's exactly why he's the president of the United States right now.
Are you a politician? You didn't answer the question.
I did. Thanks.
No, we didn't.
What was your answer? What was the question, and what was your answer to it?
My question is that.
That was my question.
The question is, the American people looked at the facts of that case. And they determined that it didn't matter, that it was nonsense, that they were false allegations, and they believe that he should be the president because they believe that his agenda of mass deportations were going to help make America safe again.
So I asked, name one piece of evidence in the case that you dispute, and you couldn't do so.
I just answered the question. You just don't like how I answered the question. I'm sorry about that.
Did you give me a specific fact of the case that you disputed?
I answered the question. You didn't like how I answered the question, and I'm sorry about that.
So you didn't answer the question. You didn't provide a specific example, right, of something that you dispute in the case, yet you still say that the American people just don't accept this case. Well, it sounds like the American people didn't do research on the case and don't even know a single piece of evidence that they dispute in it, yet they still were willing to vote for Donald Trump. That's actually more prevalent in the idea that there's rape culture within our society, that the people are willing to vote for someone like Donald Trump when he was held civilly liable of sexually abusing E. Jean Carroll, even with the level of evidence, even when there's 26 different people that have come after Donald Trump for literally engaging in sexual misconduct towards them. Now, you might think all of the 26 different women are lying. I don't. But let me wrap this back into the topic. You care a lot about undocumented immigrants committing violent crimes or bad crimes, and you try to specifically act like they are the ones that are a huge threat to our system. But actively, it's the people who you are voting for. The person who literally incited a violent insurrection at the Capitol, pardoned the violent rioters who beat police officers, and he called them patriots. He also literally tried to coup the election by literally getting people who are false slates of electors to send them to the Electoral College to cast Trump votes when he didn't win, and now he's just pardoning them. Like Rudy Giuliani, who was one of the false electors, he just pardoned him. Right? And the Trump administration admitted this in court. They just said that they were alternative slates of electors and that was within their purview of being able to do from a legal perspective, which still was undermining the 2020 election, which, I could even ask you this. Who do you think won the 2020 election?
I think that the person who lived in the White House obviously got there for a reason. So.
Okay, so Joe Biden rightfully won the 2020 election?
I think that he was the president.
They can't answer.
Okay, so now you're not accepting democracy, right?
Yeah, I think obviously he was the president. But like, to go back to your point again, I think that you try to make this argument, you try to leave the immigration topic multiple times to make this about Donald Trump, make this about violent crime, make this about rape culture. It's because you realize that this is not a winning issue for your side. The American people want to live in a safe country. They want to live in a safe community. They don't want to be, under the threat of an illegal alien who may rape their daughter, kidnap their child, or commit these acts of violence. And so I'm sorry that you're okay with these people from God knows where coming to our country and causing havoc and turning into a third world country. I'm not. I love America the way that it is, and that's the way it should stay. It's giving 60 minutes.
No, it actually is. I like this setup though. This is a really fun setup.
Yeah, especially too, it's like I've never seen a debate where people don't talk over one another. So I'm curious to see how like
especially with me
react to it.
I don't know. Every once in a while we get debates like that, but this I think is like the best way to do it, because otherwise there's going to be interruptions. Like, it's inevitable.
My face-off claim.
This is fucking weird. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I believe a certain level of civility, but like, bro just branded all immigrants as rapists. Like, I would not have small talk with this dude. Okay, I would literally be sitting there and genuinely just not talk to him until it's time to completely destroy him, not like make small talk. Like, I'm sorry, no. CJ is a disgusting human being who spreads racist lies because it's, you know, politically advantageous to him, and people will pay him to do so. I'm not talking shit to him.
Wokeness is a sign of cultural decay.
Okay, so I guess the way I would start this is, what do you mean by wokeness?
I think it's exactly what I think a lot of people have come to see it as, right? It's this idea that, you know, victimhood culture reigns supreme, that we should believe in things like DEI or, you know, the artificial advancement of certain groups of people due to their immutable characteristics, whether it's gender, race, sexual orientation, similar categories of that.
Okay, I mean, I guess first question I'll ask is, do you believe would DEI to specifically help out women get into the workforce, right? Like in like the 1900s?
I think it really didn't exist in its current form in that sense back then when women were first entering the workforce.
Okay, sure. So like, I guess in the current sense is what you disagree with.
It absolutely existed in that form, all right? Like, they had much higher quotas to get women into the workforce when they were literally barred from entering the workforce. That was one of the most like heavy examples of DEI that was needed to ensure that there were a larger percentage of women who had access to the workforce.
You don't just disagree with DEI as a whole, you disagree with DEI viewed in a modern context. So I guess what DEI policy did Kamala Harris, for example, or Democrats support that would be like, oh, I think that this is a bad DEI policy, I think this is harmful, and I think this is a sign of cultural decay?
I would say for me, it's minority quotas. It's things like that. You know, America was built upon the bedrocks of meritocracy, and I'll tell you as a person of color, as someone who's black, is that when we look at things like minority quotas, we look at this idea that we need black people.
America was built on meritocracy, yet the people who did the foundational labor were not paid for it, and still have not been granted reparations for it. Of course, it's based on, you know, if you work hard, you'll be compensated for your labor. Yet CEO pay has raised over 400%, while worker pay has barely raised about 25% in the past 40 years. Of course, it's a meritocracy. It's not. Meritocracy is a myth.
Room just for the sake of having them in the room. All it does is actually discredit the black people in the room, unfortunately, because you're going to have white people who may not have been able to get in the room or were, you know, disallowed from being in the room, who will now have resentment towards those black people in the room because they're like, how did they get there? Did they earn it? Maybe they didn't. Maybe they're just there because of the color of their skin. And I think that leads to cultural decay because it creates racial animosity between groups of people who actually shouldn't have that racial animosity between them. And so I think those types of policies like minority quotas, investments and things like certain scholarships or whatever it may be that only benefited certain groups of people, the targeting or of straight white men and, you know, the exclusion of them from institutions of higher learning in favor of different select minority groups is something that I can't say that I support. Because I fundamentally believe that I don't think blackness is a disability. I don't think that the color of my skin should be something that people, you know, take pity on me because of. And because of that fact, I have a lot of deep resentment towards people who believe that black people don't just need an opportunity, but instead need to be given an opportunity just for a chance to thrive in this country. I think that's completely,
what are you talking about?
It's the bigotry of low expectations.
So I don't know any like specific quota-based policy that like Kamala Harris or any of the particular Democrats would support. I guess maybe I'll just ask for what specifics.
Yeah, I think it was their embrace of ESG widely. You know, not maybe a part of their actual platform, you know, that was on their website, but they were definitely in alignment with a lot of the ESG policies that called for minority quotas, you know, as in terms of hiring at, you know, certain Fortune 500 companies and just corporate America overall and broadly. And so I think it would be their embrace of that type of, I would say, ethos that was the guiding point of those policies is what I take issue with.
Oh, so I'm actually not even familiar with the policy that you just brought up. Maybe that is true, specifically that they do support that particular policy. I'm not quite sure. But typically what I see people support in terms of DEI is like an idea that essentially there's going to be more like process to ensure that people are being like looked at in the process of whether or not we're going to get someone. It's not like whether or not like they meet the set of qualifications prior to that point. It's whether or not they are even given the interview in the first place. So
true.
it's not that we're wanting people who are like not qualified. That's obviously like I think obviously a misunderstanding that people typically have with DEI is we want people who are qualified. We just want to increase the interview base because we think historically speaking that interviews have been like more targeted specifically towards for example white straight cis men, which obviously we don't necessarily want to be the case because that's not representative of society as a whole. Now, we're not saying we don't want like white men in those positions. We're just saying that underqualified white men have gotten to those positions because of the fact that other people of other groups have not been interviewed. And so it's not about people believing that like people aren't qualified. It's about believing that the qualified people, particularly of those particular groups within that particular field, are qualified for that particular field to be in, that they specifically have not been looked at in terms of these interviews, historically speaking, just because of bias.
Yeah, and I think we would agree on that. I think that obviously, the interview process is definitely something that is totally fine. I think my issue, and I think the issue that a lot of folks on the right take issue with when it comes to DEI is the idea that some of these people do sometimes get these jobs because of, again, immutable characteristics that they themselves cannot control, whether it's their gender, their sexual orientation, or their race. That's where it really goes back to my claim of moral decay in this country, or cultural decay more so, is because it creates, again, that animosity between groups of people that otherwise would not exist if these policies did not occur.
This makes no sense. Yeah, people get positions for things that they can't control all the time. Okay, this is not a gotcha, okay? If two people have equally, let's say that there's a predominantly white institution in this country, which are a lot of colleges are predominantly white institutions. There's two people into that college who are applying, and they basically have same test scores, same everything. One's black, one's white. And the school's like, you know what? We have a lot of white people here. We think that diversity is a good for all, and we want to have more diversity in the school, so we're going to admit the black person. Yeah, that might happen. And that's not a slight against them. The same way, I don't know, colleges have geographic diversity, maybe not even quotas, but just, yeah, we should have some people from the Midwest. We should have people from the East. We should have people from the West Coast. And yeah, maybe a farm boy from Idaho is going to bring something what a city slicker from Manhattan is not. And that's not they're not discriminating against that person. If you think that unless you think that somehow the example of geographic diversity is wrong, we should never take any other considerations that are outside of someone's control into consideration. No, we're admitting whole people. We're admitting people, whether it's to jobs, whether it's to institutions, to improve them as a whole. And diversity is a valiant effort and valiant aim. And one of those is racial diversity. So if you have an overwhelmingly unequal and undiversified workforce or institution, then prioritizing that is not discrimination. It's ensuring a more equal workforce that benefits everyone. And does that mean that, yeah, some white people might not get the job if there's a lot of white people there? Yeah, that's how it's going to work. Okay, and that's the world. And you don't always get to control everything that happens. Okay, and sometimes things might not go your way. Okay, tough luck, tough shit.
And I think there's also examples of instances where you have folks like Joe Biden, who said that he would, choose a black woman to be his VP,
God, yeah.
Which of course then leads to a narrative around Kamala Harris, which she chose him because she's black, which she chose him because she's qualified.
Christ. This is so fucking stupid. Reagan said that he would nominate a woman to the Supreme Court. Republicans aren't fucking up in arms about that. Okay, yeah. Guess what? Before Ketanji Brown Jackson, there had never, Sonia Sotomayor was a black woman, I believe, or person of color, woman of color. I don't believe there ever been a black woman. I believe she was, I don't remember her exact ethnicity, but I don't believe she was a black woman. There had never been, or there have been very few out of the over 108, I think, Supreme Court justices. 5 of them had been women, period, and only one of them, in Sonia Sotomayor, had ever been a woman of color. So yeah, okay, out of the overwhelming amount, there's a large amount of black women who are qualified to be on the Supreme Court. We're going to choose one of them because there hasn't been one before. That doesn't mean, and the same way, or was he mentioning Ketanji Brown Jackson? He was also mentioning Kamala Harris. Fine, yeah, there's never been a woman vice president. There's never been a black woman vice president. It's not that they're not qualified. Okay, if anything, I'm not a Kamala Harris fan whatsoever at all, but she was superbly qualified in the sense of the previous work that she had done. She had been the district attorney in California and San Francisco. She had been the attorney general of California. She had been a senator from California. Yeah, she's superbly qualified to be vice president. Okay, so even if Biden never said anything about her being a black woman and he nominated her, conservatives would still be up in arms about it. So it's not this idea of, oh, if you just never mentioned DEI or never mentioned including, we'd never say that these people just got, no. Okay, even if they said nothing, yeah, she definitely got it because of that. Because in their mind, no one can ever be qualified over a straight white guy. If anyone gets a job over a straight white man in an institution that is predominated by straight white men, of course, they're just so unqualified. It's just fucking exhausting.
And I'm sure that you would argue that she was qualified to be VP because she was Attorney General, she was a DA, and all of these things.
Hey, there you go.
U.S. Senator.
Correct.
But the question or the conversation is no longer about those qualifications anymore because Joe Biden just said, I'm choosing a black female. And so people say, oh, well, that must be the most important thing to him. So maybe that's why she got it overall.
Not the most
and of
important
course,
thing.
you know, whenever she opens her mouth, she doesn't do much to lend credence to the idea that she would be qualified for that position. But I think that's not the only instance. I think also, too, looking at the idea of wokeness leading to...
Saying people, like, are bad with words or, like, whenever they speak, they don't lead credence to their credibility, and also supporting Donald Trump is fucking wild. Like, just in general. Like, do I need to say anything further? Okay? Like, oh my God.
Things like, you know, biological men playing women's sports, which is just completely, you know, nonsensical, scientifically disadvantaging towards young women. That's a problem. I think that's absolutely cultural decay. That would have been a crazy...
Here we go. 1 second. I just want to make it very clear. According to CJ, and the only two things he brings up as like evidence of things that are harmful to women are trans women, and we're talking about sports. So we're talking about like 5 people out of a total of like over 500,000 in the NCAA. We're also talking about undocumented immigrants who commit a vastly low amount of crime. He only cares about protecting women when he can use the facade of protecting women to demonize trans people and immigrants. Okay? That's the truth. I don't take you seriously. I don't take you seriously about caring about women when you don't think they deserve reproductive freedom, when you don't believe they deserve equal pay, when you don't believe they should be taken seriously for sexual misconduct allegations, or believe that the Me Too movement is a valid thing. I don't care. You have lost credibility, okay? You don't care about women. You just hate trans people and immigrants and then use women and protecting them as a cover to mask your hatred. I don't give a shit. I'm not taking you seriously. Okay? When you vote, I wish Parker would just actually just fucking hone in on this. When you vote for a serial predator, someone who's literally in the Epstein files, who said that he's attracted to younger women, just like Jeffrey Epstein, this is fucking exhausting, man.
Thing to tell our grandparents and probably our parents just a few years ago that they would have their daughter forced to compete against biological men in sports like volleyball or swimming or wrestling, only to see their daughter, who've worked incredibly hard to achieve what they achieved, robbed from them by a man. Which I thought the left was against the patriarchy, but they seem as if to be okay with the patriarchy as long as it's an extension of the woke agenda.
So one thing that a lot of people don't know is actually Trump, before picking Amy Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court, he actually said that he was going to pick a woman. So, I mean, I really question why. Why did they specifically have the conversation about Kamala Harris, whether or not she's qualified, just because Joe Biden said that he was going to pick a black woman? But for some reason, whenever Donald Trump said that he was going to pick a woman, no one questioned that with Amy Coney Barrett. So that's a question I would have. And I think that that's actually not related to like them specifying prior that they're going to pick a certain type of person. And also, just because you're picking a certain type of person doesn't mean that they're like not qualified. So I think that if you want to identify that, like from your perspective, that Kamala Harris isn't qualified from your view, then it shouldn't be based upon the idea that just Joe Biden said this, because then you'd have to say the same thing for like Amy Coney Barrett. And then what was the second thing you said? Actually, I remember. You said specifically trans women, like for example, in women's sports. So I actually think that after multiple years of HRT, in some sports, there's particularly no unfair biological advantages that would make it unfair insofar as that people could be able to play in those circumstances. And I also don't think it's like a big issue on like a national stage to even be addressed in a format like this, because I don't think that there's enough trans people that are like quote unquote dominating these spaces. Obviously, we want fairness. Like no one's going to dispute that. I just push back on the idea that there can't be any trans women specifically that could play that would make it still fair. Like there still could be fairness within that. And then also like the idea that we're viewing gender in this context is not from a biological standpoint, it's from like a social standpoint. It's based upon the commitments that we have towards certain social norms and characteristics as a prescription of our identity. So that's the way that I view gender. Now, I understand the idea of like there are certain biological elements that people specifically like can have an advantage for engaging in certain sports, and I actually agree in certain circumstances that there is like a particular fairness issue. Again, if there's not like multiple years of HRT, they have gone through a male puberty, for example, there are circumstances like that where obviously there can be a fairness issue. But I push back on the idea. I don't think it's true in all circumstances, and I think the overall ban doesn't make sense. And I also don't think it makes sense to address on a national standpoint, as I think it's mostly like a non-issue.
Well, to address your first point about Amy Coney Barrett, I'm against all types of DEI hires. So it doesn't matter if it's happening on the left or the right. I don't think there should ever be someone given a job because of their race, their gender, their sexuality.
Are they given it because of it? Or is that a consideration in the hiring? Amy Coney Barrett and Ketanji Brown Jackson were not given spots on the Supreme Court because they were women. They were given spots on the Supreme Court because they were well-qualified judges. And very few women had ever been on the Supreme Court, and it's valuable to have diversity in those positions. Okay, so like there's a difference between like picking from a pool of well-qualified people who've been underrepresented, and giving it to just any random woman. It wasn't a random woman; these are well-qualified judges. I don't agree or like Amy Coney Barrett. She's well-qualified to be in the Supreme Court in terms of her being a law professor, being a circuit judge, and now being on the Supreme Court. Like, yeah, that's a pretty normal path.
Full stop. So if it happened on the left, it's bad. If it happened on the right, it's bad. Full stop for me. Number two, I think those on the Olympic Committee would actually disagree with you, because just this past week, they announced that they would be banning all transgender individuals from competing in the competitions in categories of which that don't belong to their biological gender and sex, because they recognize the fact that there are clear biological differences that lead to differences in performance and differences in their ability to compete in their respective races and events because of those biological differences. So they believe that it's a big enough problem that not only do they want to address it on a national scale, they want to address it on an international scale. So I would say that as well. And number three, the idea that this is just a rare problem so that we shouldn't address it, I would push back on that. If this was your daughter, if you had a daughter, this would be a very important issue for you. If you were a young woman competing in college sports who had dedicated your entire life to the love of the game, and you had the biggest...
Tied for 5th place in swimming, like Riley Gaines, and grifted off of it. Jesus Christ.
Opportunity of your life robbed away from you by a mediocre male athlete who decided that he wanted to play dress up one day, you would be very upset about that. And I push back on the idea that gender is some type of social construct because I don't actually believe that being a woman is just a costume. This isn't Spirit Halloween. You don't just decide to be a woman, right? Being a woman comes with a lot of different challenges and unique things to them. You actually are making me sound like a feminist, Parker, over here. Being a woman means that you're having things like a menstrual cycle. Those men don't have to go through that. Being a woman means that you have to go through certain challenges in your day-to-day life that men don't have to go through.
What are some of those?
Again, I sound like the feminist over here, which is really interesting to me because that's how far left the left has gone. That's how woke they've gotten, that they've actually forgotten core constituents of people that they used to long rely on for political power. And it's ironic because I remember when I was first getting involved in politics, the left would often talk about how Republicans were waging a war on women, when it's very clear to me today that it's the left that is waging this war on women. They're waging a war on women's sports. They're waging a war on the idea that being a woman is not some, again, costume or social construct, but it is who they are biologically and fundamentally. And also, too, they've even tried to erase women by calling for the erasure of the word mother and substituting it with the idea of birthing person?
No.
Do you support that?
No.
So there's a few things here. I do think that you can...
It's stupid. God, people who get up in arms about the term birthing person are just insane. Okay? Like, yeah, people give birth. Okay? Like, I just don't... This is, like, stupid when you get offended at language. I love how the right is like, oh my God, we're not the snowflakes. But as soon as you use a word like that, it's crazy. Calling someone, I guess, someone who gives birth but doesn't identify as a woman, like, I don't know, if they don't want to identify as a woman, that's fine. And if they give birth and they prefer a term that isn't mother, I don't give a shit. Okay, that doesn't erase mothers who give birth. If other people give birth and prefer different terms, okay, a mother is someone who gives birth. Okay, like, are mothers not people? Do mothers not give birth? Are they not birthing people? Like, I don't. What aspect of that do you have an issue with? It doesn't reduce people to their capacity to give birth. It just is another descriptor, okay? Women are not birthing people. Women who have children are people who give birth. Like, it's such a stupid language game, and it's a waste of time.
use the term mother. There are people who are pregnant. It's not all circumstances we would specifically use that, but I think you can use woman in most circumstances. There's not an issue with that. But the typical point that I would make is that I don't think that womanhood is just defined by their biology. I think that's obviously like an absurd way from my idea of understanding womanhood. And I do agree that in typical women do deal with certain things typically, but that doesn't mean it's always true. Like for example, right, there are women who are born without uteruses who are still biologically female, and yet they might not specifically deal with certain things relating to the context of having a uterus, but they still are a woman from your perspective. So it's not that every single one of these things specifically is dealt with by women. That means that that's how what identifies you as a woman. So like I push back on that idea. And then also like it's not just a costume. No one's claiming that. Like we don't think people engaging in drag, right, are women, right? They're engaging in drag. That's a performance, right? This in this context is based on someone's identity, kind of similar to like our names, right? We utilize the name Parker. There's nothing biologically that identifies that I'm Parker, but we utilize that, and it's based on respect that we engage in that, and it's a method for identification. It's based on identity, right? Those are obviously things that I think are important in the context of engagements in society. Now, if you're saying that it could have some sort of implications, particularly within other scenarios, like again, what you brought up in terms of sports, I still push back on this. I don't think it's important for us to even talk about it, but is it something that maybe the Olympics might make policy on? Sure. But is it enough of a thing that we should talk about it in the first place to even get to that point? I just don't see that as a good argument. And then secondly, like, I think that this is oftentimes because of like outrage in society. I don't necessarily think it's because there's people who are dominating. So could you name like any specific people that you think are dominating across the board that are making it unfair, like maybe 4 people that you think are dominating?
Well, I think, of course, the biggest example that comes to mind, of course, is the story of Leah Thomas, who is a very mediocre, male swimmer before they decided to transition and become a female athlete, become Leah Thomas. And, of course, we know their story with Riley Gaines, and she was actually robbed of the ability to hold her trophy because of the fact that Leah Thomas had transitioned over to her event and had beaten her in that race as a biological male. And so I think any one of those instances is one too many for me. Like that's why I'm saying I think we fundamentally disagree that just because this isn't happening every single day doesn't mean that it's not happening enough. The first time it happened was enough for me. I think that it's absolutely absurd to, again, belittle the accomplishments of female athletes and biological women all throughout this nation just because we feel bad and we think it might hurt the feelings of trans individuals in this nation. I don't agree with that. But not just in relation to the female sports issue, just look at what happened recently in California. There was a lesbian black woman who was banned from a gym because she took issue with a biological male who had been arrested for domestic violence. He had actually beaten a woman up, broken her jaw, and she was banned from the gym because she took issue with a man with a penis being in her locker room as she changed. And now we're attacking. I thought black voices
I haven't heard of
matter.
this.
I thought,
here we go. Fine. Here's something the left needs to do. These things are stupid. If they happen, then yeah, the left should not champion it. Just because, like, this is the problem, I think, with people on the left, okay? They feel, in order to defend trans people, you have to defend the most ludicrous and insane ideas and claims. Like, yeah, okay, if someone has been, now granted, I've never heard of this case, so I'm going off of what CJ is saying, which is probably a mistake, because I'm sure he's getting some aspect of the case wrong. But if, let's phrase it in the hypothetical, so I can speak about this. If what he's saying is true, and that did happen, if it did, then yeah, that person should not be allowed in a locker room, period. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if someone has been accused and, like, convicted of domestic violence, they should not be in a men's locker room or a women's locker room. They should be in jail. Okay? And who's doing more to ensure that people who commit crimes are not able to, continue to, like, exist in society in terms of domestic violence? Certainly not the right. Many people on the right are trying to petition against the fact that people who have committed domestic violence should be barred from owning firearms. So people on the right are like, oh my God, it's an infringement of their Second Amendment. Okay? They love to fetishize the Second Amendment over women's safety, but suddenly, oh my God, they care so much about women's safety when they can demonize trans people. It's just fucking exhausting.
Black gay voices especially matter, but I guess they don't matter when you go after the communities of people they don't believe that we're allowed to go after.
So it sounds like you just mentioned Leah Thomas, which I don't think that she specifically is dominating in every single one of these races. She didn't win every single one of her races, and she's also not even competing right now. If that's the only example we could give, then there's clearly not enough examples where we should even be talking about this. I get your point of you don't want it to be happening in any specific circumstance, but it just doesn't make sense to address on this nationalist perspective. There's so many things you could point to within life, right? Specifically within the context of sports, like certain performance enhancing drugs, for example, that even if it happens in one circumstance, you could be like, oh, this is the most horrible, ridiculous thing. But what would be the point to have a conversation about that and a conversation about wokeness or politics? I just genuinely don't understand that perspective. And also, are you someone who watches women's sports typically?
I don't know many people who do.
Okay, so then, like, do you really care?
I care because I don't have to care about an issue personally happening to me to actually believe that it requires action, right? You know, when I look at what's happening in cities like Chicago and Memphis, I don't live in any of those cities, but I look and I see, you know, of course, black children being brutalized, murdered in the streets, and their parents not feeling comfortable allowing their black kid to go out and play because they don't know whether or not they're going to come back home in a body bag. And so I've never been in that position. I didn't grow up in those cities, but I still have empathy for those people because I'm a human being who believes that they don't deserve to live that way in the same way that I don't believe that female athletes deserve to have their womanhood treated again as some type of costume. But again, wokeness is not just as it applies to, you know, DEI or, of course, you know, the inclusion of biological men in women's sports, but also leads to the infantilization of the way in which people treat minorities in this country, which I take issue with fundamentally. The idea that so many people, white liberals especially, believe that blackness is a disability or that being brown is something that they should feel bad for. I think there's a lot of resentment among, you know, for that and towards that among a lot of people in the black community today, which is exactly why we're seeing a lot of young black men coming over to the right. We're seeing a lot of young black voters overall coming over to the right because of the fact that this type of
they're going to give Parker
is
3.5 minutes now.
Not it for a lot of people.
There was one point, I think you were bringing up the National Guard at that standpoint, and I also do think that people should be safe, and I think that I believe in safety in general. I don't think that Trump was addressing crime in that circumstance to the degree that he should have, because he was originally trying to send them to Democratic areas where there's essentially a constitutional issue with doing so. So if the idea was to specifically like address crime, it should have been sent first to red states where there would be no constitutional issue, and then you would be able to address crime to a greater extent. And then also, it's really only going to be enforced when the National Guard are there, and then also the National Guard has an issue with like being able to even enforce the law or like arrest people. So there's a few things that we could bring up in terms of that would be relevant in terms of addressing crime. But overall, in general, I totally want to address crime. That's a totally legitimate thing to like bring up. But like one thing I want to go back into in terms of pointing at is that like in these circumstances, if you're talking about specifically like the context of bathrooms, I'd hate to bring up Trump again, but he literally bragged about walking into the changing rooms of naked women while they're changing without their consent, and an 18-year-old came out, so there were 4 girls as young as 15 years old in these changing rooms, so Donald Trump would barge in. If you have such an issue with it where we need to address it in something like this type of conversation, right, you would seemingly also have an issue with it in terms of Donald Trump doing that, and that would be like a reason you probably shouldn't support him, right?
Well, I'm not familiar with that story, so I can't speak to that. But what I can speak to are the clear instances of trans men, you know, going into, you know, bathrooms. There was the Target situation that happened just a few years ago.
Trans men or trans women? What?
To a massive boycott of that organization, which they have since walked back because of just how deplorable many people found it. So I can't speak to that particular claim or story. I'm not familiar with it.
Oh, okay. So trans men are biologically female, and in these circumstances, if we have to go send them into bathrooms based upon their biology, they're going to be forced to go into women's restrooms. And because they're male presenting, masculine presenting, they're going to get assaulted going into those bathrooms. Like, I know trans men who will absolutely get assaulted going into those bathrooms because they think that they're cis men. They don't know that they're trans. So you're putting a lot of trans men specifically at risk, forcing these particular standards in place. And then also, you're not actually like making anyone safer necessarily. Trans women are not a threat to cis women in the context of these spaces. There's actually very good evidence indicating that there's not an increase, particularly in the likelihood of those particular types of crimes happening, given that trans women are allowed to go in those particular spaces. Now, if you'd like to provide me a source or a study, something that indicates otherwise, maybe you can make a prescription otherwise. And then also, like, the idea that like a cis man is going to portray themselves as trans to be able to then assault women is easier if we're forcing trans men to go into the women's restroom, because trans men are more masculine presenting. So any cis man could just go into the women's restroom, claim that they're a trans man, and what are you going to do? Check their genitalia? Right? Like, so you have to have a basis for this that understands what's empirically going to lead to a better outcome of people being safer. And I don't think the idea of restricting trans people specifically from spaces like that I don't think there's any good evidence indicating that it makes people safer. I think all the evidence indicates it makes people less safe.
Are they not?
Are you okay?
I guess Parker didn't even want to use all his time. What the fuck is this
walking around
stuff?
like a baby deer all day.
Dude, no, I was at the grocery store, huge puddle of water in the freezer section. I slipped. There was no sign, nothing.
Oh man, did the store take
ad?
at least any responsibility? Well, this video is injury cases and
It
how
is Morgan
Florida
Morgan.
case can be a person.
Jesus Christ. All
Okay,
right.
this episode.
Do you think
Here we go.
Claim is Trump is terrible for the economy.
All right, here we go.
Do you think Biden was good for the economy?
I think he was preferable comparative to Donald Trump.
Why is that?
Well, I think he's preferable specifically because of his bipartisan infrastructure bill, his CHIPS and Science Act, the PACT Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. I think those are all beneficial specifically to people in need, and that obviously is going to create better off circumstances for our economy, more stable for working class people. And I think Donald Trump's policy is incredibly destructive. His tariff policy causes prices to go up, it causes the GDP to slow, and it causes a worse off labor market for people who are trying to get employed. And oftentimes the response is, oh, well, it's going to increase domestic manufacturing. Well, real domestic manufacturing investment has actually declined since Trump got in office, and not only under this term, but under his first term, we saw a decline.
He's not listening to anything Parker's saying. Frankly, all of it is going over his head. I will be curious if he has like any metric here.
And under Biden, we saw massive growth because of the policies that I just mentioned. So if you specifically want to talk about the economy, I think that the best way to actually address this is by saying, what policies did they pass? What was the effect of those policies? And really, how does that impact the average American?
Well, I think the entire idea of this being called the Inflation Reduction Act was a misnomer from the beginning. It didn't actually reduce inflation, and what it actually did do is hire 80,000 IRS agents who disproportionately target middle class to lower income Americans with audits. They're not going after the top 1%. Why are they not going after the top 1%? Because those people can hire CPAs and fancy lawyers and all of those things, but they are going after everyday Americans. And so I can't say that that was an economy that was working for everyday working class people, unfortunately, but that was part of the course.
There needs to be more IRS agents, okay? When you strip down the IRS's ability to audit people, yeah, of course the rich people are going to get away with it, okay? And there's absolutely no evidence to the claim that hiring more IRS agents means that more everyday people get audited, okay? That's not where the focus is on, okay? Of course it's on the people at the top who are able to do that. And it happens all the time, okay? Yeah. Coincidence, Trump fired all those people and now suddenly the rich get more in tax cuts. Like, whoa, what a shock. Rich people get even more in taxes, more off their taxes when they're able to, there's less IRS agents and ability to audit those individuals.
Administration, he made it incredibly hard to be an everyday American in this city or in this country. Everything from grocery store costs. There were often times when there were things that were not even on the grocery store shelves under his presidency. Gas was of course out the wazoo. This president has actually worked to address that, to reverse it. We're seeing continually everyday goods like eggs and things of that nature, meat prices going down. I think 3% down year over year. Pretty incredible numbers there. We're looking at gas prices continue to go down. S&P 500 hitting record high this year under this president.
And record lows because of tariffs and instability. This is so stupid. I've talked about this before. I'm literally sick in the head because I have to keep fucking talking about this. Blaming Biden for inflation when it was global is fucking insane. Okay, it's just stupid. Okay, the fact of the matter is about global inflation because I'll explain this again. I literally makes me want to rip my hair out. When you have a global pandemic, supply chains slow, especially gas, because people are not going anywhere when there are lockdowns and when the economy is, in many cases coming to a halt. So supply chains slow down because there's no reason to be drilling if there aren't people who are going to be driving and flying and using that. So what happens is that as you are coming out of a pandemic, there is increasing demand for these goods. And the supply chain has to ramp up. So there's a period in which supply cannot meet demand. So the prices go up because there's not enough of the supply. Gas prices had been dropping ever since 2023 when Biden was still president, and they've continued to drop. Okay? This is why it's so ludicrous to blame an economy on who was president. Okay? Economies are residual. It takes time for their policies to take place. And of course, CJ is going to talk about all this infrastructure and stuff that, oh my God, look at what's happening under Trump. He's, getting all these companies to build all these plants, despite companies just making good on progress on promises that they made during the Biden administration. So I don't know. I'm losing my train of thought, Frank, because listening to this conversation is just making me want to.
So I think that this president is actually doing what he said he would do, which is bring down cost. He's making it more affordable to be an American.
That's factually not true. Tariffs have made things infinitely more expensive. Okay? It's just true. I mean, when you add tariffs onto it, it's an additional cost that companies pass on to the consumer. That's just the case. We saw skyrocketing prices. Now that Trump has backed off his tariffs and companies don't actually believe he'll follow through with it, sometimes they don't preemptively raise prices, but it usually does happen.
And again, the people elected him because they realized just how terrible Biden's economic policy was, and they realized that we could not endure 4 more years of that, or 4 more years of the TV version of that from Kamala Harris.
So the Inflation Reduction Act was actually deficit reducing, meaning that it would put a slight downward pressure on inflation. So I agree, like the title of it was like a little bit misleading, and I think that they even acknowledged this themselves. Really, it was about investment in renewable energies and also like making it more affordable for people to be able to get access to insulin if they're on Medicare, for everyone on Medicare, not just for parts of Medicare like it existed under Trump. So I think that's a specific good policy. And then in terms of the audits, income tax is disproportionately progressive, right? So meaning that if you make more, you pay more into the system, meaning that if they're going to go after greater levels of revenue, they're going to go after people who are rich. So I have yet to see any evidence that the audit specifically invoked by the Inflation Reduction Act specifically targeted working and middle class individuals to a greater extent. I'd love to address that if that's actually true. Now, I do know that tariffs actually do disproportionately negatively impact lower and middle income individuals because they spend a greater proportion of their income on consumer goods. So if you're spending a greater proportion of your income on consumer goods and there's an increase to the consumer goods cost, that's disproportionately going to be more for people who are lower income. So as a percentage of their income. So I think it's a regressive tax that harms working class Americans, and I think that that's not good for our economy. Now, in terms of the overall jobs, in terms of the inflation with eggs that you're bringing up, eggs specifically, that's because of bird flu, has nothing to do with Donald Trump's policies or anything like that. If you want to look at the overall economy, inflation has gone up since Trump got in office. Gas prices have gone up since Trump got in office. The stock market growth has actually gone down as a percentage terms since the end of Biden's administration. So although it's at all-time highs, it was at all-time highs under Biden, and it's technically growing at a slightly slower rate. It's not that much of a difference, so I'll give you that, but it's still a difference to note. And then alongside the fact that real GDP growth has slowed, real median wages have slowed in terms of their growth, so that's also a huge issue. It's actually estimated that's going to be around 1%.
Why aren't they fact-checking this shit? You know what I mean? And all the surrounded episodes and all that, they're always fact-checking. I wish they would fact-check on the spot, okay? Wouldn't it be great? You know, like in sports games, they get challenges. Like the sports teams can challenge the result of a play. Imagine if they got each person got like 3 challenges or something, or maybe 1 challenge per prompt, and they could fact check their opponent on one thing, and they'd review it, and then in the actual moment, they would do some live research. God, that would be awesome. I really think they should do that.
Real GDP growth for this next quarter that's upcoming, which slows. That's actually massive slowing of growth because it was 3.8 for the prior quarter and it was negative 0.6 for the quarter even prior to that. So we have lower real GDP growth since Trump got in office, and we see that extended because of a lot of the different policies that he's engaging in. Now, it's not 100% determined by his policies, but it's heavily influenced by it, and it's definitely worse because of him comparative to what it would be if Democrats were in office.
Well, we're going to address those points, and I think that it's very optimistic of you to believe that we would be in a better economic situation under Democrats when we know what the economic situation was under Democrats because we lived through the Biden years. We lived through the Biden years when people would go to the grocery store and they would be going down the aisles and they would actually go to check out at the cashier lane and they would have to take things out of their shopping cart because they couldn't afford to live in Joe Biden's America. So I don't have to imagine what it was like to live in Joe Biden's America. I know what it was like to live under a Democrat president with a Democrat economic agenda, and it did not work for everyday Americans. It did not work for working class families. It's exactly why they came over and they supported President Trump. But to address some of your other points here, the tariff argument is interesting. There are fundamental trade imbalances between many countries right now in the United States that have ripped us off in trade for many, many years. It's been allowed to happen by presidents on both the left and the right. President Trump said no more. And again, this president ran on that. This is not some random thing he pulled out of a hat. This is exactly what President Trump said he would do. He said that
maybe it's bad. Like, I don't like he's defending it as if, oh my God, the American people voted for it. Okay, cool. You guys are wrong. Like, I don't. What do you? The American people voted for this, therefore it must be good. Like, cool. Maybe all of you are wrong. I don't care how many stupid people are in the herd. It's still dumb. Okay, it's still not good. Like, I don't.
No longer be taken advantage of on the international trade stage. And the American people voted for him knowing full and well that that was going to be his agenda. And already we have recouped tons, billions of dollars because of his work on that front. And he is prepared to distribute those savings to the American people. He announced just this past week that he's prepared to give $2,000 checks to everyone so they can have a piece of the success of his successful tariff agenda.
Oh my God, the only reparations Trump and Republicans will ever support is tariff reparations. Oh, it's so funny. Guys, I fucked up so bad. Here's $2,000. Please don't be mad at me. Oh my God. Guys, it's another hush money payment. Okay, Trump's giving out another hush money payment. Please take the $2,000. Don't be mad at me. Shut up.
And so here's the deal. While there was going to be some slight discomfort with this new policy, as there is with every new policy, this is actually a policy that in the long term is going to be good for American producers and American consumers. It's seldom in between that you get an economic policy that works for both of those groups of people. And so I'm proud to see that. You're seeing a president who has forced, countries like China and Argentina to start buying American farm goods. That's a win for American farmers, one of the biggest industries here in America. And so God bless President Trump for his leadership on that. But let's also talk about making life easier for everyday working class Americans in this country, because I think that's fundamentally important. The big, beautiful bill, President Trump passed no tax on tips, which the Democrats could have done. Never did. He also passed no tax on overtime because he believed that hardworking hourly employees who punch the clock every single day deserve to have support and shouldn't be.
They don't deserve health care, though. They don't deserve SNAP benefits. They don't deserve Medicaid. They don't deserve to have their emergency room visits covered. They don't deserve to have their insulin covered. What the fuck are we talking about? Oh my God, yeah. So if you get tips, overwhelmingly so. By the way, it only applies to cash tips, okay? Which an overwhelming majority of tips are not that way. If you work in service industry or in retail or wherever that works, yeah, sure, you don't have to report your cash tips in the same way. Okay, so they're just going to take it off the top if it's like in card or digital, and that sort of thing. So it's what is it? It's a release valve. It's pennies off the top. Okay, I'm not saying it's not important. And Kamala Harris also agreed with no tax on tips. Okay, yeah, okay, you're gonna run on it, but it doesn't actually fucking solve anything. Does it make things marginally better? Yeah, but it's scraps.
Penalized for working harder and doing all they can to put food on the table. He did that. This president did it because he is a working class president for working class families. And so as I see, of course, Democrats love to try to play the game that they are the affordability party. I don't see that. Socialism is not going to solve the affordability crisis in this country. So I look forward to seeing what they do in New York City.
CJ, my God, you got to stop using words that you don't know what they mean. Oh. It's literally every time a Republican says the word socialism, I lose infinite brain cells, okay? Jesus Christ. Just tell them to define socialism. Just fucking get the easy gotcha, Parker. Gotchas are your thing. Go for it. Can you tell me what socialism is? Can you know what socialism?
Because apparently that's the future of this party's economic agenda. And if it's the future of this party's economic agenda, the future looks a lot more like Venezuela than it does the United States that I know.
So inflation under the Biden-Harris administration, that wasn't caused by the Biden-Harris administration. That was specifically global inflation that impacted the entire world. I think it's disingenuous for you to point to inflation that happened under the Biden term and be like, oh, it's Biden's fault just because it happened. It's actually something called the correlation causation fallacy. Just because two things are associated does not mean one caused the other. For example, during the summertime, there's an increase in the rate of ice cream consumption. There's also an increase in the rate of violent crime. Just because there's an increase in the rate of ice cream consumption and an increase in the rate of violent crime, does that mean people eating ice cream are causing violent crime? No. It's obviously a correlation causation fallacy in that respect. Also, we can give a specific example. 14.8% unemployment under Trump's first term. Was that caused by him? No. That was due to the pandemic. Right, that was due to COVID. Had nothing to do with Trump in that circumstance. So I'm willing to acknowledge that from that perspective and not necessarily blame him just because it happened under his term. I really wonder why Republicans wouldn't do the same thing for Democrats when Biden was in office. Because again, like I brought up earlier, we should mention policies that caused inflation instead of just blaming Biden. And a lot of times people say spending, but Trump signed off on over $4 trillion more debt-related spending, according to the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, comparative to the Biden-Harris administration. $8.4 trillion overall from Trump, $4.8 trillion non-COVID related, $4.3 trillion overall from Biden, $2.2 trillion non-COVID related. So I give specific examples how Trump caused more debt-related spending.
Well, I think to go back to your point, I think you actually kind of just point out a key difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump and their respective administrations. When Joe Biden had a problem, he couldn't solve it. Inflation maybe it was causing, it was happening all around the world, but it was also, of course, affecting Americans here at home, and he couldn't solve it. When President Trump was handed a 14.8%, I believe you said, unemployment rate, what did he do? He solved it, because President Trump is a problem solver. He brought about the lowest black unemployment rate in our nation's history.
Oh, here we go. Lowest black unemployment rate in our nation's history. Okay. This is one of my most viral clips that went viral back in like 2021 when I was debating. Okay. Yeah. Black unemployment. I remember these numbers. Black unemployment reached a high in 16.8%. Under the Obama administration. So he brought that from the 16.8% to 7.9%. Trump brought it from 7.9% to 5.4%. Continuation. Okay?
Latino unemployment rate in our nation's history. There was a point in time when this president actually had more jobs available than there were people available to fill them. Because this president, of course, as I
No,
said,
that's
is
never
a
been the
problem
case.
solver.
That would mean we'd have a negative unemployment rate, which we've never had. There's always been some unemployment rate. Okay, there's always some people who are not going to be in the workforce. What? Wouldn't that mean he's just not creating enough jobs? Like,
fixer. He's a builder. Joe Biden was a failure in every abject way. And so looking at all these things, when you say, like, how come we don't give grace to, Biden on those issues? I think we do. What we don't give grace for is that he tried to tell us that he was working to solve this problem, but we saw no evidence of that in any way whatsoever at any point in time.
Yeah, so there's a few things here. There was actually a lower level of black unemployment under the Biden-Harris administration, and overall unemployment. It hit 3.5 for overall unemployment at the 2019 under Trump, and it hit 3.4 two separate times under the Biden-Harris administration. And by the way, for that number, it's a 50-year low. There have been points in history where it's been even lower than that, even lower than what it was under Biden at 3.4%. So I do think that that's a misnomer, and that's not actually true. And it's also, again, a correlation causation fallacy, not really demonstrating what policies he passed to cause this, but something that just happened under his administration that you're applying to him. And then in terms of the overall acknowledgments in terms of affordability. I do not think that Donald Trump is the affordability president. I mean, he didn't have a plan for housing. He didn't have a plan specifically to make it more affordable for Americans. All he did was say that he was going to reduce prices. We get into office, he doesn't reduce prices. He actually ran on policies to increase prices. Tariffs do increase prices. The way in which, under your view, they would increase domestic manufacturing is by increasing the cost of goods coming from countries around the world for the American consumers, getting them to then prefer American-made goods rather than the goods from other countries. And by the way, trade deficits aren't like a bad thing, right? If I decide to buy something from a different country, but they don't necessarily want to buy products that we've made in our country, that doesn't necessarily mean we've done something bad there.
we're also always going to have trade deficits, okay? We're never going to have a trade surplus with Indonesia, okay? Like, what do you... Of course, the United States is always going to sell more than they buy from Indonesia, from Mongolia, from Libya. Like, what? we need to have no trade deficits with any country. They're not producing shit. Like, what?
It's a free market operation, and I decided to buy that because it benefits my life. I value that good more than the money that I'm sending to them, and that's why I engaged in that free market transaction. So since it's a voluntary and beneficial exchange, mutually beneficial exchange, why would you say that would be harmful on behalf of an American engaging in that? Are they engaging in the wrong decision, buying that product?
No, it's wrong because we call them trade partners, not trade freeloaders, right? So if we're buying a certain amount of goods from your country, we expect that same thing in reciprocity. That's not a radical belief or idea. We expect our partners to support us in the same way that we support them.
If I really want your thing, you better really want my thing just as much. What? It makes no sense. Make better shit. Like, what? You sold me something. Imagine a hot dog vendor be like, you bought a hot dog from me? Okay, like, I expect to buy something from you. Or expecting the hot dog vendor to buy something from you. You bought his hot dog. Why isn't he buying, I don't know, your stupid wrist bracelets that no one wants? I don't know, it's just stupid. Like, it's idiotic.
Radical belief or idea. We expect our partners to support us in the same way that we support them. In terms of you just described how tariffs work. I think that was economics 101. Yes, they lead to, domestically produced goods being more attractive to consumers. That is true. Why is that an economic tool used by presidents? It's because it's going to create jobs here in our country. It's going to create opportunities for people in our country. Fundamentally, I don't really care about making Japan great again. I don't care about making Argentina great again. I don't care about making any other country but the United States of America great again. And so if we're creating jobs here at home, if we're revitalizing American manufacturing, we're creating opportunities for our children, our sons, our daughters, that is what I care about.
This dude's literally just a politician.
Yeah, Republicans just voted against an amendment that would send the $40 billion that's going to Argentina to American citizens to extend the ACA subsidies for another 2 years. So instead of focusing on reducing healthcare premiums specifically for American citizens, they're sending $40 billion to Argentina. So if you want to make America great again and not focus on other countries, you should focus there. And then also, again, a trade imbalance doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything economically wrong there. There are plenty of countries around the world that are not going to be able to demand products from our country in the same way that we demand products from their country, because we have a great consumer base and we have more people in our country. For a lot of other countries, they have a smaller country. So they might be producing more goods that we'll be buying from them than we are going to be producing goods sending to them. And that doesn't necessarily indicate a bad economic relationship. The trade deficits you're looking at, I know they seem bad, or they seem like maybe they're adding to the debt or something like that. No, it's specifically just talking about the level of imports and the level of exports going between nations. Something in terms of tariffs that a lot of people don't take into account is that it increases the cost of domestic manufacturing within this country. Because a universalized tariff was placed, many of the aspects of the manufacturing process come from countries around the world. So it makes the domestic manufacturing process more expensive here in this country, therefore disincentivizing it and causing those goods to be more expensive, alongside the fact that it destroys export jobs in this country that rely on selling their products to countries around the world, because when we place tariffs and they place tariffs back on us in terms of a retaliatory notion, it causes our products to be demanded to a lesser extent in their countries. That's why Trump is talking about utilizing the revenue, right, specifically to help out farmers. But apparently he's able to use this revenue for multiple different things, right? For the revenue to help farmers, to give people a $2,000 check, and so many different other things. So how is he using this revenue for all of these different things when there's not enough revenue specifically from these tariffs to be able to do that? And also the revenue from these tariffs is coming from a regressive process, meaning it disproportionately, again, negatively impacts lower and middle income individuals. If you want to raise revenue, get it from income tax, a progressive structure.
Well, I think, again, looking at trade deficits and that issue, I think a lot of these tariffs were reciprocal tariffs. These were countries that already had tariffs on our goods, which is actually more of a problem to me, right? Like, you're saying that we're partners, you're saying that we're friends, you're saying that we're allies in all of this, but yet you're having, a certain percentage of tariffs on our country, but yet we're not matching that same energy. It just doesn't sound fair to me. And that's deficits aside, right? Because as you said, the consumer bases are different, productions are different, all of those things. But fundamentally, there is no reason that a country should have an X amount of tariff on us and we don't match them where they are. And so I'm glad to see President Trump saying, no, we were not going to get jerked around the world stage anymore. In terms of other issues and the distribution of these tariffs, I think that you acknowledge, again, an issue that I acknowledged, which is that there is going to be a slight discomfort with any type of new policy like this. And the president realizes that, which is why he's offering this direct...
And why did he say prices would go down on day one? That's what he campaigned on. Not day 684, day one. Another lie.
Cash assistance to everyday Americans in the form of the savings that we have been able to recoup as a result of this policy that otherwise would not have been possible.
So I understand the idea of reciprocal tariffs. I just don't think any of these were actually reciprocal. If you look at the percentages that we placed on them, we placed them to a higher percent and on practically every industry, whereas they only had targeted tariffs in these situations. And I would love to hear one specific country that had a universalized tariff on us, where you placed the exact same tariff on them that they placed on us.
Well, I think also, too, when it comes to those universal tariffs, there were many instances where there were carve-outs, right? There were carve-outs for different types of, like you said, on the production standpoint, the manufacturing standpoint, there were lots of domestic manufacturers who said, hey, we're getting this from Japan, and we need a little bit of a carve-out here. We need help on that. Or there's also been a willingness for this president to push back, some of these deadlines in the interest of these negotiations that Scott Bessent's been leading.
So I don't think necessarily negotiations have led to positive outcomes. Again, if the tariffs are imposed, it reduces investment into our country because it increases the cost of trade between countries. So if you want investment to come into our country, if you want us to be able to get these trade deals that will be beneficial, I don't see how we get that by still keeping tariffs in place. Now, you could be saying that tariffs are used as a mechanism specifically to get people to negotiate, but then the tariffs are not going to be in place. And then also, why would we be placing tariffs on countries like Canada and Mexico when through the USMCA it mitigated those?
I would say, again, it's a bargaining tool for this president that he's used to, bring in billions of international investment. Countries like Japan have announced billions of dollars of investment. We have other countries who have said that they're willing
guys,
to be
I'm not much to add on
economic
this.
partners
This is just them
on
speaking
new
past
ventures
each other
here.
the whole time.
They would not have been brought to the table were it not for tariffs. I think this president's taken a very innovative approach to bringing these folks to the table. And again, it seems to be working. We're seeing job growth. We're seeing wage growth. We're seeing, again, record performance on the stock market. It's the highest point that it's been since 2021. And I think that President Trump deserves some credit for that.
We're actually not seeing job growth. We're actually seeing a reduction in jobs. Specifically, Goldman Sachs has come out, and this is even a right-wing source that indicated we actually are seeing upwards of possibly even 100,000 jobs that are going to be lost from this last month. You brought up low unemployment under Trump's first term to bring up oh, this is something good that he's doing for the economy. But since Trump's got in office, unemployment's increased. And the jobs numbers became so bad that he fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, claiming it was politically biased information. And then he put someone new into that position. They indicated even less jobs for the next month. And even the person that was already in that position, they indicated an 818,000 jobs revision, literally 3 weeks after Harris launched her campaign. So if they were politically biased to support liberals, why did they do that 3 weeks after Harris launched her campaign? That makes her look bad, doesn't it?
You know, at the end of the day, there was also a revision that showed that the previous BLS director had, you know, inaccurately reported those numbers as well. And so it's very common for these revisions to happen to BLS statistics. I'm sure that you're familiar with that. So I can't say that that's an anomaly. I'm not familiar with that anomaly that happened, you know, under the Kamala Harris administration, but I am familiar with the missed job projection that you were citing. And of course, the revision that came out just, I think, a month or so after that, that showed that those numbers were incorrect.
No, this is from recently. This is not like from months ago. And also like the revisions, it's not necessarily that they're inaccurately reporting on numbers, it's that they have new information now that shows a better view of what happened. And that Trump's calling it political bias is definitely not considering it normal. It's definitely considering it like, oh, this is attacking me, because he thinks the job numbers are so bad. So even Trump believes the job numbers are so bad that he can't even believe that they're actually real.
I think month over month, we're continuing to see growth across the economy. We're seeing the cost of goods coming down, which is important, and I think that's exactly what the American people voted for. And you can shake your head and be upset about that, but the American people, they're actually going to grocery stores every single day. They're not upset about that. They're grateful for it. They're grateful for a president who cares about them, who is enacting an economic agenda that doesn't just work, for a certain tier or class of Americans in blue states and their cosmopolitan, cities. That's making it easier for them to get their Erewhon smoothies, but they care about the folks in middle America and, the Rust Belt, blue states even, so that they can actually afford to survive. I think that, we would be remiss, though, if we didn't talk about, if Trump is bad for the economy. You know what's bad for the economy? A government shutdown, which is exactly what we're in right now because of the Democrats refusing to reopen the government. They're holding hostage our nation. They're holding hostage the paychecks of the brave men and women who wear our country's uniform.
I thought government shutdown was the fault of a weak president, according to Trump. What?
They're holding hostage EBT benefits from, everyday Americans, which I thought you guys were the party of hardworking, working class Americans, but yet apparently not when it comes to making sure they're able to put food on the table. How do you explain that, rationalize that, holding the lives of these people hostage just to score a political win?
Yeah, so they were engaging in policies that I think that were beneficial to reduce premiums of working class Americans who rely on the ACA. Now, millions of Americans will see their premiums increase by a vast amount. For the average American, I've seen estimates that go upward of over 20% for the average American, and I think that's something that they should be fighting for, is to keep premiums down for working class Americans. That's wanting to make it affordable. And they were trying to negotiate, but Republicans wouldn't negotiate on that fact. So that was the issue, is that they were keep doing the same CR, no negotiation, and forcing Democrats to accept it. So I don't know why you just blame only one side on this. I understand saying like, oh, there's some level of blame for Democrats, some level of blame for Republicans, but it doesn't make sense to only blame one side in this context, especially given that Donald Trump himself has said that it's actually the president's duty to get Congress to come together to vote to keep the government open, specifically under their administration. And since Trump's been in office, both two different terms there's been 2 government shutdowns. I would also point to the fact that Donald Trump, overall, in terms of the economy, he is focused more on the rich people of our economy rather than people who are in need. The big beautiful bill.
My final face-off claim: the right is the party of tolerance, not the left.
Yeah, so I guess we would have to start with, what do you consider to be tolerance? Because I don't think that from either our perspectives, we're going to be tolerant of every single belief or every single ideology. It's about tolerance within a degree of acceptance. So what's your basis for tolerance?
My basis of tolerance is the free expression of ideas. What we've seen on the left is a complete disdain for that freedom of expression, a complete disdain for freedom of speech in this country, as our founding fathers intended it to be. We saw the perpetuation of cancel culture coming largely from leftist institutions, leftist creators, who have sought to basically unperson people who don't toe the ideological line that they prefer. If you believe that a woman is a woman, you're labeled a bigot. If you believe that blackness is not a disability, you're labeled a bigot by those on the left. These are the things that the left has used in an attempt to quail speech. And I think that if you're anti-speech, if you're anti-freedom of expression, then you also are anti-tolerant. But also, too, it's bigger than that, right? It's about the idea of allowing people to disagree and not trying to cause them harm. We saw just a few months ago the assassination of Charlie Kirk, where a far-left individual shot him dead in front of many, many people because he took issue with the fact that Charlie Kirk was a man of faith, someone who believed in the conservative ideals that he dedicated his entire life to. Look at the text from Jay Jones, the now Attorney General-elect in the state of Virginia, who fantasized about the death of his political opponents and their children. That's not tolerance to me. It's blatant distolerance, but also, too, I would say, to spin the word right back at you, it's bigotry.
So I don't think that these would be mechanisms for identifying the entire left is this particular way, as there have been MAGA individuals that not only have gone after Donald Trump, but have also have murdered the Hortmans and have also specifically like attacked Paul Pelosi with a hammer. We can point to those particular circumstances and we can point out how like people on the right were specifically condoning it or okay with it to some extent. But I don't think that's representative of the whole side. So I don't think that we'd pick like specific circumstances like that to demonstrate whether or not a certain side is tolerant of certain ideas. And I also don't think the idea of cancel culture of like there's people that specifically have disagreements with you means you're canceled. I mean, I've had people disagree with me on the left. That doesn't mean that I was canceled. So I guess what's your basis for saying that someone was canceled?
I think looking at, a pre-Elon Musk, X even, right? You saw people who, if they were saying certain biological facts, the fact that men are men, women are women, they would be banned from the internet in some cases. You look at instances where people have been debanked. Donald Trump Jr. was debanked. Eric Trump was debanked. President Trump was debanked. These are powerful names and figures.
Because we're keeping their money in offshore banks in order to avoid taxes. Committing wire fraud? Like, what? Guys, the left cancel me. You can't even commit financial fraud anymore. Like, what? Eric Trump defrauded his own children's charity and then was barred from running a charitable organization. Gosh, you can't even commit fraud anymore.
But because they were conservative folks who had fallen out of good graces with the elite in this country, they had lost their entire ability to commit commercial transactions in this nation. That is cancellation to me. It's not cancellation to get, a few angry tweets or TikToks made about you. I think that we can all take that. But I think what truly I think is un-American is when you have people who lose their ability to conduct commerce in this country, who lose their ability to even engage in the public town square, which has become social media in this country because of what they're saying is hurting someone's feelings, even if it is true biologically and scientifically. That to me is cancellation. And I think that when you look at the power structures that exist in this country, those power structures were never used against those on the left to the degree in which they were against those on the right.
What?
You didn't hear these stories of leftists being debanked. You didn't hear these.
They weren't debanked. They were deported. Okay, like what? Mahmoud Khalil, the student at Columbia University, was either in the process or has already been deported for his speech and the fact that they didn't like him. They called him a terrorist sympathizer for daring to criticize the Israeli genocide in Palestine. Gosh, they weren't debanked, they were deported instead. Like, I don't care. Like, they're literally going after people for the things they're saying. And all these free speech absolutists were so fast to say that anyone who didn't sufficiently mourn the death of Charlie Kirk should be fired, should be exposed, even, send death threats to him. Yeah, of course. It's ridiculous.
Stories of leftists losing their ability to go on Twitter because they said bad things and naughty things about white people. Actually, they probably got a few more retweets than usual for saying those terrible things about white people. But however, if you directed those same comments towards a protected class, someone like me, someone who's a member of the black community, you were banned. So there was always this clear double standard that existed in terms of enforcement that was directed disproportionately negatively towards those on the right and not those on the left.
So you're really just talking about how private companies are operating their community guidelines, which the same issue has happened with TikTok. I've been streaming on TikTok for years now, and I've been dealing with bans for a very long time. I'm actually on my third account because 2 bans, permanent bans have happened to my account prior. So the idea that people on the left haven't been banned at all, I think is just not true. You might hear more about people on the right getting banned because you are on the right, as I might hear more about people on the left getting banned as I'm on the left. I don't think that that's a basis for saying, oh, the left is specifically in support of cancel culture. It's a particular business saying they want someone on their platform or they don't want someone on their platform, and that's their decision to make. Under free speech, they can make that determination. And one thing I would say that relates to this is Trump himself recently has said that if he could make TikTok 100% MAGA, he would. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the president saying that, the TikTok platform would be favorable to MAGA content is of course his preference. I think any leader of any political party would want any platform to be a supportive base for their political ideas and their values. As we've already seen, actually, there's a lot of support for President Trump on TikTok. We see that his content actually performs better than Kamala Harris's did during this past election. But that's probably in large part because of the fact that, I don't know, he was a lot more authentic and better at reaching young people where they are. But to go back to your point about private corporations, let's not pretend as if a lot of these tech companies are disproportionately ran by those on the left. But we don't only have to talk about actually.
People are just, all of the tech bros are sucking up to Trump. What are you talking about? Tim Cook literally gave Trump a golden statue, a golden trophy. Mark Zuckerberg, all of them, Elon Musk, all of them were literally just lined up right there. All lined up at his inauguration, literally donating to his inaugural fund and his ballroom, his White House destruction. What?
Corporations in this sense. We can talk about a more recent example with Sydney Sweeney, who participated in a simple ad talking about good genes. Good genes. She just wanted to show how good her genes were. And because of that, because she was a attractive white blonde woman, let's be real about what made people angry on your side about this, she was canceled. I think that's just silly to me. It's silly to me that, number one, a woman cannot go participate in a harmless ad, say that she has good genes, referring to an article of clothing, her pants, and not.
But what's the point? It's not a funny. The ad doesn't have its edge. The joke doesn't work unless it has undertones of eugenics, undertones of racial superiority, unless you get a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman to say she has good genes. Literally, it was like genes determine traits such as hair color and eye color. It was literally there. It was not like an implied. It was literally just there. Like, maybe white people shouldn't joke about genetic superiority. Is that like a thought? Like, I don't. Yeah, it was meant to be controversial. It was meant to get clicks. That was the point of it. So to deny that it had any undertones is insane. It was literally just about genes. Like there was no double meaning at all. It's just fucking stupid.
From your side, be accused of somehow being a Nazi sympathizer, which many people on TikTok were saying about her, again, only because of the fact that she participated in an ad promoting an article of clothing.
So let me address the point. 100% MAGA means that there is no disagreeers. It means 100% they're canceled off the platform, which means me, I run a TikTok live stream where I debate people, means I wouldn't be on the platform, which means I 100% would be canceled under Trump's perspective. Us disagreeing with the Sydney Sweeney ad is not us canceling Sydney Sweeney, meaning she can't go on any of these platforms anymore, but Trump saying 100% MAGA is canceling me from being able to speak on that platform. Imagine if Kamala Harris went out and specifically said that she would want a particular social media platform to be 100% anti-Trump if she could do it. That means suppressing the other side, not just disagreeing with them. So you can bring up situations of people disagreeing, but you can't bring up circumstances of, say, Kamala Harris, right, or a particular person who's literally in the leading for the Democratic Party for being the next candidate, specifically saying that they would want a particular social media platform to be 100% in support of their particular political ideology and to no other people on that particular platform. Secondly, Elon Musk owning Twitter and obviously people specifically who are affiliated with Trump and being able to own TikTok is a very, very different change in terms of who is going to own social media platforms. So this idea that it's specifically just left-wing owned now is obviously not something that is especially true today.
So I will actually circle back to your point. You said that I can't point to example of those on the left who have not tried to bend social media and big tech to their will. I actually can. What? We saw with the release of the Twitter files multiple instances of where we had government figures reaching out to tech executives, to folks at Meta, to folks at Twitter at the time, asking them to commit certain enforcement actions against those on the right. This was the federal government colluding with big tech in an effort to silence conservative voices. There is an example.
By conservative voices, do you mean people who are saying that vaccines are not real? Okay, in the middle of a global health pandemic that has killed over 1 million people at the time, millions of people worldwide. That's the collusion? Wow. By collusion, do you mean the Biden administration contacting Twitter and asking them to get posts taken down that revealed naked photographs of Hunter Biden that were revealed without his consent? Wow, collusion. Once you actually put specifics in it, you realize how fucking stupid CJ sounds. Okay, because he talks in generalities. This dude is literally just practicing to be a politician. He says literally nothing while towing the ideological line all the time.
Of them trying to make at least maybe not 100% blue anon, but they definitely were trying to skew social media and our feeds and the way in which we receive content in a way that was more favorable to their political ideals. And so I'll push back on that. But also too, I'll push back on the assumption that when President Trump said he wants TikTok to be 100% MAGA, that he was saying that he wanted to silence voices like yours. I think that there are a lot of progressive voices that actually bring more people to the MAGA side. So I think we want more of those voices on the platform. And I think the president did not say that he was going to be coming after folks on the left and asking TikTok to ban their accounts. What he wanted to do was bring it under U.S. control in an effort to safeguard the platform and making sure that it's in alignment with American interests. And so the president, you folks don't give him the benefit of the doubt. Similar to the way in which he says that he's running again for president and you guys call him a dictator and a king as if he's being serious. I think when the president said he wants TikTok to be 100% MAGA, again, it was a wish, it was a desire in the sense that he wants his message to should be so organically supported by those on the platform that it shows the groundswell of support that we're seeing across the board among young people drifting towards our side in the political argument.
So again, when he says if he could, that means that at this point he thinks that he couldn't do so because it would be a limitation, right, that he couldn't specifically get away with. But in this context, it's saying that he does support it. And he never said like organically he wants people just based upon them believing this to get to that point where it's 100% MAGA. But he was saying specifically about how the structure of the social media is set up in the first place.
Exhausting.
I don't think you can try to walk around that and act like that's not him actively advocating to limit free speech. I can give other circumstances as well. Donald Trump has explicitly passed an executive order to put people in prison for a year for burning the American flag, which is a violation of the First Amendment according to the Supreme Court because it's symbolic speech. So I can point to explicit examples where Donald Trump, the head of your party, has actively gone after people's speech. And the circumstance that you brought up in terms of the quote-unquote Twitter files, was there any enforcement mechanism on that specifically that said like they have to abide by what particularly people in office were saying they should?
Well, I think these platforms are scared of the FBI. They're scared of a weaponized executive branch that controls whether it's government contracts or their ability to conduct commerce in their operations here in this country. So there doesn't need to be a direct threat. There's going to be an expectation of fear that's understandable for anyone. But going back to your previous point about you saying if he could, I think you've already admitted to the fact of what I just said, right? That he said that he wishes that TikTok would have again be a hotbed of MAGA and all of those things, but he realizes that he can't. A man can have dreams, right? So I think that at the end of the day, this isn't him saying, I'm going to force TikTok to, again, ban progressive voices, which would be intolerant. But let's also, again, go back to what true intolerance is. True intolerance is putting a bullet into the neck of your political opponent. Political intolerance is going after their livelihoods because they say things that you don't like because they acknowledge there are only two genders. They realize that there are biological differences between those two genders. That is political intolerance. Political intolerance is trying to, stop assemblies of conservatives on campus because they hurt your feelings when they say things that you don't like. As we saw just a few weeks ago, where we saw Antifa throwing firebombs at UC Berkeley because they were upset that Turning Point USA was having an event on their campus. That is what intolerance looks like. And again, when I look at this issue, especially when it comes to political violence, which I think is the extremity of political intolerance in this country, the bullets are coming from left to right almost exclusively. You mentioned Melissa Hortman, and you try to say that a MAGA person killed her.
Yeah, it was a
There's
Republican.
no evidence of that. She was the shooter in that instance was a Tim Walz political appointee. Is he appointing MAGA people to office in Minnesota?
He's a Republican. What are you talking about?
That would be true news to me. But I look at of course the shooting on the congressional baseball game. That was a Democrat. We look at what happened, the 2 assassination attempts towards President Trump. Lots of ties.
Registered
to those on the
Republicans.
left. And of course, unequivocally, we see what happened with Charlie Kirk and the threats that have ensued since then against other prominent figures on the right like Benny Johnson. So I think it's pretty clear as to where the political intolerance lies in this country. It's clear as day.
Well, if you look at domestic terrorism, most of that domestic terrorism is committed by right-wing individuals. That's according to the FBI themselves. It's according to the government data themselves. So I don't see this basis of it's just coming from the left exclusively. I think that's definitely not a good argument. The person that you're referencing that specifically did go after the Hortmans, they absolutely were MAGA. Like, that's a fact. I don't know where you got this idea. I'm not actually quite familiar if they were appointed by Tim Walz, but it is a fact that they are MAGA. This has been widely reported on across the media. It's not specifically just like a claim that I'm deciding to make, and I'm open to like that being false too. Like maybe I did misinterpret some information like that. If that's true, that's definitely like a point to make there. But it doesn't mean it's exclusively coming specifically from the left targeted towards the right. Secondly, like you said that there are explicit examples of them trying to go after people and limit them from speaking on campus. I actually followed when Charlie Kirk was alive, like the Turning Point events, and I specifically was going to one of them to specifically debate Charlie and to host my own specifically at Texas. And they specifically tried to get our ability to speak taken away and removed. But prior to going into the event, they wouldn't let us specifically talk to Charlie. Charlie didn't want to debate and actually engage in a conversation, yet tried to act like at the end that like he was trying to engage in a conversation after he already knew we had left. So I mean, there are plenty of circumstances we could point to where in conservative situations, like they might not want liberals to speak. But generally, I don't think these particular specific circumstances can make a proportionality claim about the entire left or about the entire right. Do you at least agree that it doesn't allow for you to make a proportionate claim and only you can just give specific examples?
I would say that, of course, generalizations, I don't want to be hasty in those, right? But I think that at the end of the day, when I look at the absolute number of these instances as they occur on the left or the right, I definitely agree that they occur far more on the left, these acts of intolerance, than they do on the right.
That's just not true, though. Like, I mean, just providing the specific examples you did does not necessarily give you an overall idea of what happened. It's specific cherry-picked examples that you have for people who are specifically on the left targeting the right. But you could say, yeah, well, Parker, you gave specific examples of that way. Well, that's the point of why I brought it up, is because originally you brought it up with specific examples from your side. So if we can give specific examples on both sides that indicate that, then that's not a claim of proportionality. It still happens on both sides. It's not a claim of proportionality. So I don't think that's the measure for determining whether or not someone's tolerant. Right, and for what you brought up earlier in terms of bigotry, I do think that we can say, and I think we could agree, that bigotry is more common on the right for specific forms of racism, homophobia, sexism, etc. That is more common on the right, especially because, I mean, Donald Trump himself specifically literally engages in those particular types of bigotries himself. But that's the point that I would point to. So if you want to talk about like hate or bigotry being prevalent on a particular side and that being indicative of tolerance or intolerance, well, then you could point to that on the Republican Party. You could also point to the fact that Donald Trump himself has said that that he hates his opponents. So in that in of itself, if you consider hating your opponents, right, specifically to be intolerance, well, then Trump himself has said that or engaged in that intolerance himself.
Well, I would disagree. I think that when you have folks like Gavin Newsom who are calling President Trump every single day a fascist, though that was on the bullet that killed Charlie Kirk, or was actually in the gun, in the chamber of the gun that killed Charlie Kirk, that is political incitement of violence. Not liking your opponent is one thing. Actively using the words that led to the death of your political opponents is completely different.
These people on the right are fucking full of shit. That's not shocking. Look up Douglas Cornett if you don't know who he is. It's a really interesting story. He basically got out of a car. He followed two people who he believed were undocumented, who literally were just, people of color, Mexicans, interrogated them at a gas station and asked if they were legal or not. And when they ran away, he shot both of them, I believe killing one, and one was in critical condition, and was calling them animals, echoing the exact same rhetoric that Donald Trump espouses about immigrants. So, and even CJ was echoing at the beginning of this episode, just to sort of suggest that somehow Gavin Newsom is responsible for the death of Charlie Kirk because he used a word and this other guy used a word, despite the fact that this dude also was also writing stuff about groypers on there as well. Is a very, very weird claim. Okay, it's just not true. I don't know. I'm getting faded here. This is exhausting. They're saying a whole bunch of nothing all at the same time.
Bigotry. That is wrong. That is intolerant. And to push back on your claim that Donald Trump is some racist bigot, this is the president that brought about the lowest black
people.
Rate
Oh my God. Oh my God.
System when Barack Obama didn't do it. Joe Biden didn't do it. Kamala Harris never even thought about it because she was too busy locking up black people in San Francisco while she was bragging about smoking weed on the Breakfast Club. So this entire idea that Donald Trump is some bigot, again, the American people aren't buying it, which is why they overwhelmingly elected him with both the popular vote and the Electoral College just a few months ago.
Newsom actually got a lot of pushback for people on the left because he specifically called Trump a communist, but has yet to call him a fascist. So, I mean, I'd love to see this particular clip of him calling him a fascist, because I actually do think that Trump meets the 14 characteristics of fascism, and I don't think me saying that he's a fascist is inciting violence. I mean, he's called us fascists. So do you think that's him inciting violence towards us?
Well, I think what Gavin Newsom did was clear. He called him a fascist following the death of Charlie Kirk. As I just said, there was a chamber in that gun that killed him that said that he was a fascist. Catch this fascist is actually what that bullet said. And so he knew what he was playing into, and anything that comes from that, the blood will be on his hands.
Okay, so that was from a video game called Helldivers. That's not specifically even like ideologically necessarily motivated. The determination from the investigation was that he was a nihilist violent extremist, not that he was some left-wing lunatic like Donald Trump is specifically claiming. So you could say that there's some ideological makeup specifically within the action. I'm not disputing you there. And even if it was the case that they specifically were doing so because he was a fascist, that doesn't mean that calling Donald Trump calling Donald Trump a fascist is political incitement of violence. That's just, there's no basis in argument for that.
Oh, I think there is a clear basis of that. There's a clear correlation between using that word and the actions that, that the crazies on the left are taking because of that word. And so, honestly, I don't think you can, claim ignorance at this point when bad things happen to the people that you use those words against. You say you want to bring the temperature down. Using words like that is not how you do it.
Okay, so let's go through these. So let's kind of like identify what is fascism and what are the specific bigoted things that Donald Trump has done. Well, Donald Trump didn't rent to black people in the 1970s. He called for the execution of the Central Park Five, even though they were exonerated based on DNA evidence. He popularized the birther movement, saying that Barack Obama was born in Kenya with absolutely no evidence that he was born in Kenya when we have a birth certificate of him born in the United States. He's also specifically said that Kamala Harris turned black, indicating that she wasn't black prior. I think undermining her being a black woman specifically is absolutely him perpetuating racism as a white man.
Well, I think black people were saying that first. Black people questioned whether or not Kamala Harris was actually truly a member of our community in any meaningful way.
Okay, well, just because there were some people who are black specifically saying that
So
she
you're
isn't
gonna get a
black
whole
doesn't mean
2.5
she isn't black.
minutes.
Kamala Harris is Indian and she's black as well. So the idea that people can't understand that you can be biracial is something very, very, very confusing to me. She's obviously a black woman, and to undermine that, I feel like is not only disingenuous, but takes away from the fact that Donald Trump engaging in that behavior is absolutely racist on behalf of a white man, specifically denying her being black in order to take away from her as a person herself.
He doesn't have time.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it went well, and I think that this is actually really important. I think discourse like this is critical, and I think that it's actually kind of funny that it kind of forces you to listen to the other person. And so
You didn't
there were
listen
definitely
to
some things that you
shit,
said
dude.
that I wasn't aware of, and that I'm sure I'll think about in the future. But yeah, lots of passion on both sides, which I think is good for the country.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate this conversation. I think it's really important to engage in these dialogues. That's why I literally do this on a daily basis on my own live stream, because I think political discourse is necessary not only to keep people informed, but also to keep people educated, keep people involved.
Yeah, this wasn't keeping people educated, dude. We didn't fact check anything. They were both allowed to just completely spew whatever they wanted. There should 100% be fact checking.
Get involved in the process, we lose control over our own democracy, which I think is something that we could both agree with is something that we don't want to happen. We want a democracy, we want people to work together, we want people to have these types of conversations, because inevitably it leads to a greater understanding and it brings us together as a society. I do think that these types of conversations are necessary for us to come to some type of middle ground and come to an agreement so that we can actually compromise on policy. We need to come back to a country where we can engage in this type of way so that we can actually compromise, work together, instead of fueling the divide so that we are separated to a greater extent even more. So I'm really happy that this conversation went through, and I'm really happy to have this type of dialogue. And I hope that this platform provides the ability, without interruptions, of course, to have productive and fruitful conversations.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, man.
When it comes to the president, we'll agree to disagree, but good to see you.
Appreciate it.
Oh Lord. All right. Well, we can talk a bit more about this. I don't know if I have that many thoughts, but all right. So that was quite the video. I don't know. It's an interesting format. It's a bit of an annoying format if you're not going to actually fact check what people are saying, so people can just CJ was off in his own world talking about points that didn't even matter. I don't know. I think the no interruptions sometimes works, but it also doesn't work if people are allergic to answering the point, because then they can just go on a tirade just forever and ever. And also I don't know. Parker didn't use all of his time multiple times, which makes me feel like Parker is just trying to get a few gotchas in instead of expanding on points. I don't know. This is not designed to be a bunch of infighting against Parker, but I don't know. It was a fine episode. It was interesting to watch. I Jubilee, if you're watching, I'd be interested in being a part of one of those potentially. Though, I don't know. I think maybe the one-on-one without the clock would be an interesting format as well. I really do think the challenge idea is a good idea. I might let someone know about that. If or when I possibly film an episode, I think just being able to have just a couple hey, fact check live, and they actually look it up and see what happens would be fascinating as an idea. But that's kind of all I've got. Sorry for not talking a ton at certain points. At certain points, I'm sure we were both just watching the video. Sometimes there isn't much to say. You just kind of let them do their thing. But that's kind of all I've got. If you guys have any questions, comments, what you guys thought about the episode, leave your thoughts in the comments below. This is definitely an interesting episode, to say the least, and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts. If you're not already subscribed to me here, definitely give a subscription, or subscribe. Sorry guys, getting tired. Yeah, definitely subscribe here. I'll link my other socials, Instagram, TikTok, down in the comment section below. But yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Really appreciate you watching, and until next time, take care.